come to order. Welcome to the June 1st, 2023 meeting of the City of Raleigh Appearance Commission. My name is Adam Walters, and I am the chair of the commission. The Raleigh Appearance Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The Appearance Commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance. When hearing requests for design alternates, the Appearance Commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts an evidentiary hearing on the request. That means it's like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. The commission's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented at the hearing. The commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The commission must base its decisions upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards and not on personal preference or opinion. This meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearings is limited. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the commission needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. It is my understanding that representatives for case DA 4-2023 have asked to continue to the July QJ meeting. Do we have a date for that, Casey? What's the date for the July meeting? Is it on there?
It's July 6th.
July 6th.
Yeah.
So that case will, unless anyone opposes, be continued to the July 6th, 2023 meeting. We'll now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA 6-2023 on today's agenda. Casey Evans will introduce this hearing. Before you start, can you confirm that you have not been sworn in? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right.
So the subject property is located at 915 Canterbury Road and located at the southwest corner of Canterbury Road and Bar Metler Street. The property is zoned R6 in the Special Residential Parking Overlay District. The applicant is proposing to renovate the existing attached garage to relocate the garage doors so that they face Bar Metler Street. The existing driveway would be removed and a new driveway from the street to the new garage doors would be constructed. The applicant is requesting two design alternates, one to reduce the minimum driveway length from 18 feet to 11 feet, and the other to exceed the maximum driveway width of 18 feet to allow a 20-foot wide driveway. There are 6 findings of fact that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate from the Raleigh Street Design Manual. And there are 4 findings of fact to satisfy in order to grant a design alternate to the UDO regulations pertaining to blocks, lots, and access. I'm available if you have any questions, and I will invite the city's transportation reviewer up to share their remarks.
Just real quick, we haven't seen a case like this before. Can you speak to why we're seeing this case?
Can you explain your question?
Is this part of our normal scope?
Yeah, so the provisions of the UDO that they're requesting a design alternate to are eligible for a design alternate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we just haven't seen it because people haven't asked before previously?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Dustin Reed, Transportation Department.
All right. Dustin, Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide is will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Proceed.
So transportation has a couple of concerns for this design alternate proposal. The main of which would be the 11-foot depth from the right-of-way line to the face of the structure. The biggest issue with that is typically the 18-foot is for vehicle storage. This is so that you don't have vehicles being stored within the right-of-way. This frontage doesn't have sidewalk currently, but the idea is, we could one day install sidewalk along this frontage, and we will not want vehicles stored blocking pedestrian pathways. Another issue we have is, to date, we have not received any sort of profile plan to see how this driveway would be able to be constructed. One of the main issues here is that the existing grade is fairly steep. You can see this on the plot plan. I'm not really sure how to use this, but you can see some of the existing grade. Here's a photo to give you an idea of what we're working with here. And the driveway would be around where that fence is currently. Within the right-of-way, the driveway has a minimum slope that's required, or a maximum. It's a 1/4 inch per foot on what would be the sidewalk panel, and what would be considered the top of the driveway apron would be relatively the same elevation as the curb head in the right-of-way where the curb and gutter is. So if we were to install the driveway apron to spec within the right-of-way, it would be fairly difficult to get a usable driveway from the right-of-way line to the finished floor elevation of the garage. This raises maintenance concerns for the city, as this could cause scraping onto the sidewalk, which would inevitably damage it and would need to be repaired. And this is assuming that a vehicle would even be able to utilize the driveway to get into the garage.
Justin, can you point to that image to show where that curb cut would be?
Right about here. It will be going up to the face here is where the garage would be converted. And currently the home is served by a fairly large driveway. This would actually be taking a lot of vehicular real estate away from what they currently have.
Is there a precedent for a driveway of the proposed dimensions in Raleigh?
Not that I can think of.
So it sounds like, do you have concerns regarding safety or operational issues with this project?
Yes.
Okay. And is there another safer scenario that could be considered for this case?
Currently, I would say no, not with what's being proposed. With a frontage this small, speaking to like the right-of-way to the face of the house there, there's not really much that could be done than what's being done currently. By having the access go to the side of the house, it gives you a lot more room to chase grade and meet these requirements that we have.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions at this time for city transportation?
And there are no improvements proposed from the city as far as sidewalks or right-of-way, anything of that?
Not currently.
I seem to recall in my own neighborhood there was consideration of a sidewalk being installed, and the neighbors were asked to weigh in on which side of the street it was planned to be on. Is that a similar process that would be followed here?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there sidewalks in this neighborhood?
I do not believe there are currently sidewalks on, is it Bart Midler Street? There may be on the adjacent street, but yeah. Yeah, I believe this is an infill development, so sidewalks are kind of all over the place.
Okay. Any other questions for city staff at this time?
Am I understanding it correctly that this would be in addition to the existing driveway, or would that be?
It would be a replacement.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, thank you.
Isabel Maddox for the applicant. May I ask him a question, please? Mr. Reed,
Sure.
you said you had safety.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. You indicated you had safety concerns here. Can you elaborate on those?
Sure. I'd say the main safety concern would be theoretically, should sidewalk come through here, through this site, we would not be able to install sidewalk to spec while simultaneously having a usable driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be more of a one or the other scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And should we install the driveway to the spec in the right-of-way, it would not be a usable driveway in my opinion. But again, we do not have a plan and profile view to show how this would be constructed. And it could cause damage to the sidewalk, the right-of-way, and also the homeowner's vehicle.
So it's not safety. It's not human safety. It's vehicle safety potentially. Is that what you're saying?
You can interpret it that way.
I think let's pause this for a second, because I'd like you to be able to present your case, and I don't think.
You have a right to cross-examine, though, the witness.
Yeah, we just can't hear both of you speaking at the
Okay,
same
I'm sorry.
time. So if you can just come up,
Yeah.
present your case, we'll get into.
So I just want to ask Mr. Reed, have you, you said that you didn't think the sidewalk could be built consistent with the driveway. Have you done the engineering calculations to say that? Sorry.
No, I have not done any engineering calculations. As I said, we would need a profile view, but I'm drawing from experience from right-of-way inspections of 6 years, seeing this in the field personally, where we have a lot of infill development that isn't necessarily easy to install or bring up to current code.
And have you evaluated the installation of a sidewalk across the existing driveway?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Have you evaluated the installation of a sidewalk as the driveway sits now, the existing driveway?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, if I evaluate the current,
Yeah, the proposal to put a sidewalk in there with that existing driveway.
I've done a review cycle on the proposal, yes.
No, I'm talking about, what I'm asking is, have you looked at putting a sidewalk in that location today with the driveway as it exists today in place?
No, there is currently not any project in place to install sidewalk there, so no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Maddox, could you come on up and reintroduce yourself
Yes.
and present your case?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
My name is Isabel Maddox. I'm an attorney, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. I'm here today with my client, Joe Stribalis, who's going to speak to you in just a minute, and Josh Crumpler, our civil engineer of Crumpler Consulting. First, I'd like to move the application materials, presentation, and exhibits be admitted into the record.
Okay.
And so just to go over what our request is today. There are two pieces to our request. The first is that we would like a design alternate to allow the minimum driveway length to be 11.1 feet as opposed to 18 feet. The standard in the street design manual is 18 feet. We would like to request that that be allowed to be 11.1 feet. The second is to allow that the driveway width be increased by 2 feet. The standard is that it would be 18 feet wide maximum. We're asking that it be 20 feet wide. Just give a little more room there so that when the homeowners come into their driveway and go into their garage, they can do it a little more easily. Here's an aerial photo. I don't know if you're familiar with this area. It's an older part of Raleigh, and an area where sidewalks are not prevalent. I mean, I've been in this area a lot. There's a lot of walking that goes on, but people are comfortable walking without sidewalks, and that seems to be the norm in this and in many older neighborhoods in Raleigh. Here is a survey of the property, and you can see the yellow area is existing driveway. As you can see, it's a fairly large area, comes in and turns left into the back of a garage. What we're proposing is that that driveway area be removed, which resulting in the removal of a good bit of impervious coverage, and replaced instead with the street area, the driveway area shown as the crosshatch, so that you would come along Bar Metler and you could turn directly into the garage. And the reason that we've requested this is that the family that lives there, and they have 3 small children, young children, they would love to reclaim some of this paved surface for a yard, for the children to play in, for them to enjoy their outdoors. And by shrinking the driveway area up, they are able to get that area back and plant grass there and have the kids enjoy it. We think it will improve safety there because the kids won't be as likely to be playing in the driveway. They'll be playing in a yard area. I'd like to call Joe Sribalis first, just to kind of introduce himself and tell you why he is asking for this.
Joe Sherbalis. I'm the homeowner there at 915 Canterbury.
Joe, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You proceed.
Just to continue on, we've lived in the neighborhood for close to 10 years now. We started with no children, and then in that time, my wife and I have had 3 boys, 8, 6, and 3. At the core of our request here to flip the driveway there is like Ms. Maddox said, is to get that backyard, nearly, it'll be more than double in size from what we have right now. Our kids do tend to play in the driveway a good bit now because we are limited in the backyard there. Balls can roll onto the street. We obviously tell them to be careful, but at the same time, it would be great if we could fence that in. Also, aesthetically for the rest of the neighborhood, to have trees, grass, bushes, whatever, what have you back there, would obviously be more appealing as well. Like I said, we have been in this neighborhood for 10 years. There aren't a lot of sidewalks. There are a lot of families, a lot of children. People are always walking on the streets. People are careful in that area, but just from our experience, we haven't seen any new sidewalks being put in. And so obviously we know that we come to you with the request to shorten that driveway length to make this happen. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Question I have, Mr. Sribalis. When you and let me clear this. When you and your wife come home at night or whenever you come home, tell us how you park typically.
Okay. So obviously we enter through the street. We both park in the garage every single night. I would say I'm a stickler for cleanliness, and so our garage is very well maintained, organized. We do not park in the driveway. If there are guests, similar to all of our neighbors, the street is what people park on in this neighborhood for the most part. So I don't think that any length there, the shortening of the driveway is a concern from the standpoint of we never park our cars in the driveway as is, and we have all that space, currently.
So you would contemplate that just like you do now when you come in and go into the garage, you would instead come in and go into the garage that way.
That is correct.
And you don't typically park any cars back in this what would be that area or the area outside the garage.
Nor do we currently park in here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, next I'd like to call up Josh Crumpler, our civil engineer, who's taken a look at this for us, and let him tell you a little bit about the situation and speak to some of the findings.
Josh Crumpler, 2308 Ridge Road, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Josh, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
I'm a civil engineer, over 19 years of experience in site development and civil engineering matters. I've taken a look at this with Joe and Isabel on the proposal here. The proposal is to move the driveway. I think it's east approximately 30 feet, increasing the width slightly and reducing the length. That nets in approximately 650 square feet of impervious surface that's going to be removed from the city, from the site and ultimately the city. So there is a little bit of a reduction for stormwater impacts for the city from that aspect. As far as parking, with the proposal, as Joe was stating, they would be parking within the garage, so both parking spaces would still be there. There's no net increase or decrease in parking, so there really isn't a matter there. Safety-wise, from a personal standpoint, either way, vehicles are going to be entering and exiting the site. From a personal safety, there would be no change in personal safety from that aspect. As part of the grade, there are options to raise and lower the existing floor in the garage. So we haven't explored all of those options at this time. We were just kind of briefly discussing those, but there is an option to reduce the finished floor elevation in the garage to help alleviate that. But that's not part of this design request. This is just basically we're basically here to discuss the moving of the driveway and the length of the driveway.
Okay. Anybody have any questions right now for Josh?
Yeah, Josh, do you know that currently there's on-street parking?
Correct.
Do you know what the width of the curb to curb is on that street?
I'm
roughly?
not certain. I drove through there today, but it's narrow. It's not. I don't believe it's the 27 feet. It may be though.
Have you all haven't done any kind of cross section though? I mean, do you feel comfortable that you could creatively come up with a way that would be that the car would actually be able to get into the garage at that
Yes.
slope without bottoming out, as
Right.
the city has had some concern here?
That's correct. We've looked at different options. We haven't run cross sections or anything like that, but we've discussed options of, like we said, potentially looking at the finished floor elevation. It should, with the installation of the sidewalk, accounting for it, there would be no, there shouldn't be any maintenance requirements from the city standpoint moving forward.
And without a sidewalk, do you know what the grade percentage is going to be on the new driveway?
Without the sidewalk, I'm not positive off the top of my head, but it's roughly within the parameters that the city has.
So, someone might have said it, but what's the distance from the house to the curb?
The house to the curb, I think, is 20 feet.
20 feet. And I mean, just looking at the topography there, it looks like about 3 feet of fall.
It's about 3 to 4 feet of fall.
Yeah, so you're 1 in 7, even if you connect the dots. And a steep parking garage is 1 in 8. So it's steeper than a steep parking garage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything preventing you from creating this profile?
Not at this time, no. We just have not.
And got to it?
Yes.
Okay.
We were primarily just looking at the relocations.
Okay. Any other questions?
Do we know the depth of the garage if we were to put the access on this side? Can't really tell from the survey there.
Can you zoom in on this? Is there a way to
Assume
zoom
it's
in?
more than 20 feet.
It looks like it's about 29 feet, maybe. Trying to look at the plot plan here. It's kind of covered up right in
So it's
this-
more than adequate to be able to get a car inside the garage and that.
That's correct,
In
yes.
that manner and leave plenty of room.
The grade, and I will say, the grade on paper looks a lot steeper than it really is when you actually go out there and look at it in person. I visited the site several times, and on paper it looks like it's a very steep grade, but once you get out there and actually visualize where the sidewalk and where the finished floor elevation and the driveway would be located, you can make it work. I've seen steeper driveways in Raleigh. I know there's two over there on North Hills Drive if you're going around North Hills, up North Hills before the stoplight right there on the right. There's two new houses going in.
I think we gotta keep it to statements of fact.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Thank you.
First of all, would you say that this design alternate is consistent with the intent of sections 8.32, 8.34, and 8.35, which is to provide convenient, efficient, and safe access?
That's correct, yes.
Would this relocation of driveway compromise safety or congestion?
No,
Would it have any impact on either of those things?
it would not.
Okay. Do you know that whether it conflicts with any announced plan for any city projects in this area?
No.
Does it create any additional maintenance obligations for the city?
No,
And you're a professional engineer?
that's correct,
And you're
yes.
responsible for the design of this driveway when we submit. Will this design alternate affect stormwater
It will
collection and conveyance?
reduce
So
stormwater.
it will improve the stormwater
It'll improve
situation?
it, yes.
Okay, so just talking about the sidewalk. Now, what I want to do is compare the prospect of putting a sidewalk in now with the driveway in this location right here to fast forward if we relocate, putting a driveway in if the driveway is here. Okay? So do you see anything that makes the city's process in installing this sidewalk any more difficult if the driveway is one place or another?
No, it would not pose any problems. I think the bigger problem with the sidewalk will be over here on the south, on this portion down here, and over here, it will require a large retaining wall because it does drop off quite a bit. I think it's about 6 or 8 feet in this location. And so it would require a retaining wall on the southern portion of the site. And it would have to continue across the frontage of these lots as well, too, to get that sidewalk in there.
So based on your experience in older neighborhoods in Raleigh, do you typically see the city installing sidewalks in these kind of neighborhoods? And what would be the situation where they would install?
I think if they were to install it, they would try and find the area where there would be less requirements for retaining walls, which I think would be on the other side of the street, on
But
this side.
If the city wants to do a sidewalk project, can they just go and impose that, or do they have to get,
They would have to get buy-in from the neighborhood.
but to require it, it would require a subdivision, is that right?
Well, that's a separate process. So if the city was to require sidewalk for this one, it would require a tier 2 or tier 3 or a tier 2 or tier 3 site plan or preliminary subdivision. So there would be no sidewalks required for this project.
So, sounds sort of unlikely.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you.
But, Mr. Crumple, I believe there is a process where where neighbors can request it, and given a certain percentage that request and vote in favor of a sidewalk,
That's correct.
that could be done.
What Isabel's referring to is on this site, imposing, requiring this site to have sidewalks. It would not be required for this development. It would, if someone wanted to, if a neighborhood wanted to petition the city to install it, then they could do that, yes. But that hasn't been done at this time.
So that could be done, and that results in, city council action and assessments to all those homeowners, which certainly is possible. Okay, so just to continue on, we've gone through, I think the questions I've asked Mr. Crumpler have put you in a position of being able to make the required findings. I have those findings up here and can go through them again. I will do that briefly. So the first is consistency with the UDO. There are two sets of findings. One's with the UDO and one's with the street design manual. There's a lot of overlap, so I'm just going to hit the points that apply to both. First, consistent with both the UDO and the street design manual, and the intent of those is to provide safe, convenient, efficient vehicular access without any compromise of congestion, safety, those kinds of things. The second one is does not increase congestion or safety. I don't think it has any effect on either one. There's going to be a driveway there. It's just a matter of whether it's here or 30 feet to the east. Does not conflict with any approved roadway project in the area. And we do think it's reasonable, given the situation where the family really wants to reclaim some backyard. And I don't really think there's a negative impact on the city. For street design manual, the first two or three, the three does not create any additional maintenance obligations for the city. It does not. We do have a certified engineer who is designing this, and it will be an improvement for stormwater collection and conveyance because of the reduction in impervious coverage. And so I think that positions you well to make the required findings. Finally, I want to just summarize our case. So the intent is to assure safe, convenient, efficient access in a way that does not negatively affect safety or congestion. I think we've been clear on that point. Where safety is not affected. I mean, the only safety thing is it does probably enhance the safety of the children who live in the house because they're more likely to play in a fenced green backyard than they are the driveway, so they stay out of the driveway, they stay out of the path of cars. As far as traffic safety, I don't think there's any effect. Off-street parking is really not a factor here. The city, as you probably know, eliminated its parking requirements for all properties in Raleigh. So there are no parking requirements that are even imposed here. Even if there were parking requirements, we have two good spaces in the garage. You've heard from Mr. Sribalis. They religiously park in their garage. You could also squeeze one along the side if you wanted to. I mean, kind of outside the garage in more of a parallel way, but I don't think there's any need for that. On-street parking is plentiful, available in the area. And as to the future of either a road widening or a sidewalk installation there, it's unlikely, particularly on this side of this street in this neighborhood, given the existing grade and the fully built-out neighborhood. But even if a sidewalk was constructed, as you've heard our engineer say, he doesn't anticipate there would be any difference in expense or difficulty for the city to install that sidewalk. It'd be a difficult install. Nobody's questioning that. It's just here or there, driveway here or there. It's not really anything significantly different. There is a benefit to the community by reducing the impervious. It's better for the environment. It's also more aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood. And it's a benefit to the homeowner to reclaim the yard for his children's play area. With that, I'll conclude, and certainly I or my team members are available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Maddox.
Would you mind speaking again to your clients, the rationale behind the request to go to 20-foot width versus the 18?
Well, the 20-foot width, we don't absolutely have to have that we have to have the 11-foot length. The 20-foot width we don't have to have. It just gives you a little more comfort as you're turning into the drive and getting into the garage, a little more flexibility. Again, it's not an absolute on this, but it makes that a more comfortable movement.
Can I ask, looking at the property online, there looks like there's a side yard where I can see like a soccer area or balls. Is that an existing area where
There is a small side yard that is fenced in right now, but it's very narrow.
Any other questions before we close for deliberation? All right, at this time, thank you, Ms. Maddox.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll close the hearing for deliberation. Is there anybody from the public? Oh, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Okay, at this time, I'll close the hearing for commissioners to debate. Okay, I'll start off here. I think there's a really strong case made. I can certainly empathize with wanting more green space in a neighborhood or green space on someone's property for children to play. I appreciate the reduction in impervious areas, and I expect that there probably would never really be a proposed sidewalk there. However, I think that when I imagine the grade change on that driveway entry, I think that is an issue. I think that whether or not the homeowners stay, future homeowners could choose to use that driveway entry differently than they would choose to use it, and that could cause a vehicle to park outside of the garage and cause sightline issues for another vehicle exiting onto what could be a future sidewalk. And I also just think that it's a really poor precedent for us to make to approve something like this just because we might be opening Pandora's box of everybody wants a shorter driveway. So those are my thoughts. What do y'all think?
Are there other driveway applications that could be plate-friendly as well?
Of the existing driveway?
Can you speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Are there other applications for driveways that could be more friendly for kids' play?
Yeah.
That's not a concrete surface.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
I'll counter yours, and I was thinking your way. I'm kind of changing my mind, though. I think, this community, there is no precedent for sidewalks really on any of these streets around that area. I think this neighborhood's been developed since the 50s. It's been here quite some time. There's no more traffic than there was. I just don't see the need or that the city would want to put in sidewalks on their own and or pay for them and or maintain them in an area where there's so many other things to do within the city.
And they'd probably put them on the other side of the street.
Yeah, and I think 11'4" is less than what is required, but knowing that, I think and knowing that we've got over 20 feet in depth to the curb and gutter, and knowing that I really don't see the need or that sidewalks would be implemented in this area. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I do have some current concerns as well with the slope of the getting into it. They seem to think that they can either lower the slab on the inside of the garage and or make it up in some other way. There are steeper precedents in the city of Raleigh of steeper driveways, but also not being that busy of a street really, it's not really going to act any different backing out or into the into the street.
Do projects like this normally require design drawings? And have any been submitted? It sounds like none have been submitted to the city that show a profile for what it would look like. Casey, do you know the answer to that question? Or Justin? I'm just curious because we're just going off this plat sketch.
You might want to explain too that design alternates have to be submitted in conjunction with a plan that's under review. So I'm sure you'll touch on that too.
Yeah, so typically for a standard, driveway permit, we don't get any sort of plan profile view. I would say in this scenario, it would definitely be necessary. I guess just to reiterate the concerns about the grade and slope percentages, to my knowledge, I don't believe there's any relief from our standard details through a design alternate. So we would require the 1/4 inch per foot for the sidewalk panel, and that's 1.5 inches for a 6-foot sidewalk panel. Pretty much flat, and we have a 3-foot grade elevation change, it looks like. And once you get past that right-of-way line, you're having to go from that elevation to the finished floor of a garage. We don't have the current elevation on, granted, but 11 foot to catch that, it just, without the profile view, I just don't know.
What if, let's say the city were to come in and mandate that a sidewalk was going to be installed in this location, and you cut out that, you cut into that grade and you installed your sidewalk to city standards, where does the obligation lie with the homeowner or with the city in adjusting that driveway to meet that new grade?
So typically the city would only be responsible for what's in the right of way. But if we were to go in and acquire, the necessary easements or what have you right of way to install sidewalk, I really couldn't speak to it. I mean, you wouldn't be able to simply just tear out what's in the right of way and tie in and hope for the best necessarily. You would have to adjust their existing driveway on private property to meet ours in a safe manner, basically.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we approved this and the new driveway is built, it has to be built with a sidewalk accepting apron, like every driveway in the city of Raleigh,
yes.
which means the first, it's about 6 feet, right? 8 feet?
Yeah, it'd be 3.5 feet for the driveway apron,
Yeah.
and then an additional 6 foot for the sidewalk panel, so it's 9.5.
9.5 feet. So basically to the property line is nearly flat.
Correct.
So we're trying to go up 3 feet over 11 feet.
Correct.
Which
And if that plat is right, it's actually 4 feet.
Yeah, and
over
we can
11
draw
feet.
that line, but you're going to be teetering going into your garage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I don't know if we're allowed to require this, but it would seem strange to approve this without a drawing that indicates how this is possible.
There is.
Can I clarify something real quick, though, on this issue of having a profile or visual representation? So I agree that it might be nice to have that, but just to make sure that I understand the requirements, that kind of a proof point is not actually required as part of the submission for this design alternate, correct?
To my knowledge, no. It would,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just something we could request.
We also have another standard detail for driveway grades beyond the right-of-way line that states, I believe it's the first 5 feet cannot exceed 16%, if I'm remembering correctly. So I guess realistically, take away that 5 feet from the 11, we're left with 6.4 feet to kind of do what you will with, which I believe is 25%. But at that point, it's kind of moot.
Anything else?
I'll just share that I think while there's not a plan in place for sidewalks here, I think we've seen in some of these older neighborhoods that there is a need for them, even if it's not immediate. And it's something that 5 years, 20 years from now could be really important. Especially, I mean, it's close to a big park. It's paralleling Wade Avenue, which is not a good place to walk, as we know. So I would be hesitant to approve something that's going to preclude sidewalk construction in the future.
It might be helpful, Casey, if somebody can put the findings, required findings on there so you can make sure that, any concerns are geared towards the findings.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What you're saying, Martha, is related to safety, and that if you needed to put a sidewalk there and that driveway was as steep as we are imagining it would be because we can't see it in the profile, that could be a safety issue somehow.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the findings. It talks about the burden of compliance not being reasonable, and I'm not sure, while I also, think that it's great to have a nice green yard for the kids to play in, I'm not sure that that's enough to make the case for that burden of compliance being unreasonable, since they already have a driveway access that functions.
I would also add a thought, building on what you said, Adam, just about the distance in the cars and human nature with possible future tenants. While this resident might be very diligent in parking in their garage, human nature is what it is, and future people will probably want to park in that driveway space. And I think what we heard is that from the building to the apron is something like 20 feet. Well, a standard parking space is 18 feet. So if you park like a truck or an SUV in there, now you've basically killed that line of sight from the building to the curb, and you've left like about 1 foot between the building and the curb. So it's just really filling up a lot of that space between the apron and the building. And I would agree that that starts to become a safety concern.
Yeah.
And especially when that vehicle is at a significant pitch.
Yeah. I just imagining what you're describing there, and then another car backing out, and a biker riding by and getting
Exactly.
Yeah. Certainly feels concerning.
I'm going to chime in. We have approved smaller width or depths of the driveway length. It's kind of in this tricky in-between space between where it's not so you could fit a car versus not being able to fit a car at all. For me, if there was the plan for the sidewalk or even some type of aspiration for sidewalk there, that would change things dramatically. I do think there's a high amount of reasonability to this, just pragmatically knowing that a sidewalk's not going to happen there. So I guess I'll say I'm in favor of this request. I know it potentially creates some uncomfortable precedent, but I think there's a healthy amount of reasonability to this.
I think that's where I am as well on the driveway length. I'm a hard no on the width. That's why I asked the question. I feel like that's a personal preference, not a need or something that's driving that. But I think there are, as I look through these findings, I see them allowing this to occur. Does it potentially set a precedence? Yes, it does. But I don't see a scenario where a sidewalk ever gets put on that side of the street. Mm-hmm. I know if I was a homeowner and I've gone in Google Maps all the way down Bart Mettler Street, there's no way I think a city engineer would come out and walk that street and look at it and think that that's the correct side of the street to put a sidewalk on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think the odds of there being a sidewalk there are very low, and certainly would probably be on the other side of the street. That doesn't change the fact that they have to build the standard detail that would allow a sidewalk, and that just makes it all really tricky in terms of how I'm imagining it. Yeah.
And I guess while the responsibility of maintenance may fall on the city, I think about the maintenance of someone's car continually backing and skidding on that. I would do it once. We actually have a neighbor who has a ramp because they have such a steep driveway that they drag out when they back their car out.
Yeah.
They drag it out on the driveway so that they don't scrape. And I know we've got to stick to statements of fact there, but that's clearly a position where the grade of the driveway does not meet the design intent. And to me, that seems to be a burden that's more on the homeowner than it is on the city.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add into that. The responsibility, as I see it, to kind of assess this alternate is to understand how that personal driveway and that personal property is going to connect back into, right, the city's egress and ingress in the public right of ways and a potential easement for a sidewalk that, I think we all agree probably will never happen, especially if the sidewalk on that side of the street would require a 6 to 8 foot retaining wall. And yes, that sounds like the grade of that driveway would have to be very steep. That would be something between the engineer and the homeowners for how the actual top line of that driveway, not the driveway, the garage entrance and exit actually flows into the driveway. But because they'll have to have the standard requirements for the actual apron for the connecting point to the road itself, it seems like it's reasonable that this proposal is able to satisfy the requirements here. And the risk for that individual, bottoming out of the car and all those concerns, it seems that can comfortably lie with the property owners.
I agree. I don't think that really affects the findings that we're looking at. Certainly seems important for the larger project. I'm not sure that I feel as clear that we would be. I think that we would still be at risk of approving something that compromises safety based on what Dana and I had described about the lack of sight lines for a vehicle in the future being in that driveway, being parked in that driveway and another vehicle backing out into moving traffic. And I just kind of want to lean on our experts in the city who say that they feel like this is not a safe thing. I hear them say that, and I agree with it based on my experience and expertise.
Going back to your comment about setting precedent, I mean, if we were to approve this, it seems like we would need very clear language in the way it's approved that doesn't literally open us to seeing a million of these all over the city. And I think we can agree that this condition all over the city would be a problem in many locations. Might not be here specifically, but it would be in many other places.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think with your comment on the depth of the driveway and being a safety issue, if it was 25 feet deep, there's nothing that says a car has to park up against the house. I mean, several times a week I'm parked clear up against the road in mine so I can use my driveway for pickleball and different things. And we have both of our cars right as close as we can get to the curb and gutter. It's technically in the city right away a little bit, and that's just what we do. I mean, there's nothing in there that says, hey, I've got to park here or park there in this driveway. Now, granted, most people are going to pull up close because they want to get, but, again, I think this is a reasonable request, assuming, and I think the burden of proof is on the homeowner to make sure that they can make it work for their residents. If there's.
Could we look again, because I believe part of the findings or the criteria that we're evaluating against require us to take into account either an existing or an approved project, not necessarily a future project. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are two sets of findings. The ones you're looking at right now are the findings for relief from the street design manual, and these are the findings for relief from the UDO. Mm-hmm.
All right, we're closed right now for discussion. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, item 3, I think answers the question, and I think it should be taken into consideration that there is no existing or planned roadway construction project in this area, including sidewalk.
Well, is there any other, does anybody want to wrap this up, or should we can just go ahead and take a vote if we want to do that? We should probably get moving.
So I think we should break it up into two.
Can I also say, so you have more than 9, so if you could
Yeah,
specify
well,
who's the
we
voting.
will do that.
Right.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think you
That's
only
fine.
need one
Yeah.
at this point.
We gotta figure out who's who.
Yeah, I'll get there. I just want to make sure we're done with the debate. Anybody else?
Is it worth asking the applicant whether they would prefer us to vote or whether they would prefer to come back with a profile or additional information? I don't know. Just sounds like we're
We
kind
can
of a
do that.
mixed bag here.
Yeah. Sure, we can do that. So I'll open this case to ask a question of Ms. Maddox. Ms. Maddox, here in the debate from the commission, do you have any input?
Well, first of all, I'd say that we're not here asking for a design alternate to the standard design. We've been told that's not possible. We're not asking for that.
Right.
So, you know, I don't think there's really a necessity to show you, and I don't think, you know, there's a necessity to show you the design. I can consult with my client to see if that would be their preference, his preference. But I don't think, I just want to make it clear, that's not part of the request, is a modification to the design, the standard design.
Okay.
So I can talk with Mr. Schwalis and Mr. Crumpler and see. Huddle up for 1 second.
I don't think that's in the findings.
While they're on the width, that's the second request. Is there, Marcus, on the width, you know, if they're entitled to 18 feet, is there materially much difference? You could park 2 cars side by side at 18 feet, same as at 20.
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking from a, you know, if you were to deny the 20 foot and they were to come, you know, do an 18-foot width, it's functionally the same, except it necks down a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably functionally the same. I think to me it's more about that precedent that if somebody just comes and says, "Hey, man, I'd really love to have a couple extra feet on my driveway just because it'd be easier for me." I don't know that there's justification there. Was my point. If somebody came and said, "Hey, I've got this really tight site where the corner of my property is really the only place to place a driveway, and my turning radius is difficult," like that I can start to get behind. But if for it being simply a preference.
Yeah. No, I totally appreciate the precedence. I do think wider makes it safer with regards to site distance.
Yeah.
The widest garage door readily available is 18 feet. Just to throw that out there.
Okay, we have talked, and I think we feel strongly that what we're really requesting here is just the width and the length of the driveway. We're not requesting any change to the standard design. And there's several things that have to go into developing that. And one would be like, could the finished floor of the garage be lowered? There's also some topo work that would need to be done. We have GIS numbers. We don't have official topo survey, so we don't really know if, how these numbers come out and what sort of grading can be done. So my client has wanted to know if can we get this design alternate so he can spend the money to get the thing designed. And
Makes sense.
we know we're going to be held to the standard design. So in some ways it seems to me that to go to the point of having to design it at this point doesn't really add anything to our request. We don't want to be, we're not trying to be difficult, but it's just, That's
Yeah,
kinda-
certainly understand
Yeah,
that.
that's the request is for the length and the width. Thanks.
Great.
So if the garage floor is lowered, and that is within the budget of the project, which it seems like it would be catastrophically expensive to lower the garage in an existing home, I think the driveway will end up below grade. You'll end up with retaining walls, which will then be another question of safety because you're not allowed to have retaining walls over a certain height within a certain distance of a right-of-way
Yeah.
for sightlines. So, I mean, it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like the design of the thing is part of the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree that, and that all relates to the length of the driveway, which is what is being requested in this design alternate. So I certainly think that, I mean, I kind of this is a really middle ground thing. I see both sides of a lot of this. So, but I tend to feel like all of those relate back to the length of the driveway, which is part of what we're looking at, which I think pretty clearly has some questionable elements that may compromise safety, and we were being told by our transportation staff that they believe that it will as well. So I just want to address, so we've got some alternate, we've got a great turnout tonight. Thank you, everyone. We've got alternate members here, and we only need one alternate member to vote in this vote. Is there anyone who would like to vote, who is an alternate member and would like to vote?
Adam?
You
I'd
would?
like to.
Okay. All right, so we will add Commissioner Lawson to the voting members. And is there anything anybody else wants to comment on? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'm totally game for this approach today. I'd probably suggest we just do it by seniority
Seniority?
going forward
We can do
for
it by seniority.
just as a means of not making it a pick and choose.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. So do we know who the most senior alternate member is? Thaxton? Yeah.
Only because I'll be gonna need it for the next one. I might be stepping out, so is it gonna affect the next?
No, it won't. That's the next one.
Lady, she can have it. It's fine.
Well, we should
I
probably
think
have
seniority
good-
makes sense.
We should probably have good rules, so.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Commissioner Gaskins. All right, so we'll have Commissioner Thaxton added from the alternate group for voting.
Wait, so who's voting?
Thaxton,
Okay.
Commissioner
All right,
Thaxton.
got it. Thank you.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I think probably maybe split these up. So I'm going to vote against the 20-foot width. So is my if I made a motion, would it be to approve or to deny request number 2?
Okay, so you need 5 yeses in order to be approved. So what makes the most sense, I think, is to make a motion, somebody can make a motion to approve, and then if you don't get 5 yeses, then you don't get the design alternate.
Okay.
And if you want to split them up into 2 separate votes, you could do that.
Okay.
And that would probably be best if you're going to be, if you think you might be voting differently.
So I would make a motion to approve request number 2, which increases the maximum 18-foot width to a 20-foot width driveway.
I think that's request 1. Is that request 1?
It's 2 on the staff report.
So you're moving
You
to
move
approve.
that?
I'm. It's a procedure,
Just
just
the
to bring it to a
motion,
vote.
He doesn't have
Yep.
to, yeah, and then there'll be a vote.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
You can still vote against it if he wants to.
Oh, okay.
I'll vote against my motion.
Just easier than doing a denial and then having to do the reverse, if that's.
All right, so I hear a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I'll say aye.
So we have one in favor?
I'm in favor.
We might
All
want to just
oppo-
go down, yeah.
All
We need it on the
opposed?
record, yeah, what's.
So we've got 2 in favor, all opposed?
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 I'm
Opposed.
opposed.
Everyone else is opposed?
Got it.
All right,
So the motion to approve is not granted, so the.
correct. Does anyone have a motion for the first item? I will make a motion to approve the first item.
The driveway length.
Yeah, driveway length as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have
Aye.
3 in favor. All opposed?
Hold on, I think you have 4. Is
Oh,
your
we have
hand up
4.
too?
Oh. 4 in,
Let me,
4
let
in
me get
favor.
it for the record since we don't have our clerk here.
We've got Commissioner Bates, Commissioner Tuttle, Commissioner Gaskins, and Commissioner Baxton. Sorry, Bernard. All opposed?
Opposed?
That's Commissioner Beach, Commissioner Gilmore, Commissioner Walters, Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Eberly.
So that motion to approve also fails for
Correct.
lack of 5.
The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following the adoption of the decision. Thank you. We will now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA 52023 on today's agenda. Casey will introduce this hearing.
Okay. The subject property is located at 121 and 131 South Boylan Street at the northeast corner of South Boylan Street and West Hargett Street. The property is zoned downtown mixed use, 20 stories, with the urban limited frontage and conditional use. The applicant is proposing a mixed-use building with commercial and residential uses and structured parking. There are a number of design alternates that are being requested, so I've broken them sort of into like categories to make it a little easier to go through. The first few are related to driveway spacing and cross-access. The applicant requests design alternates to reduce the minimum driveway spacing between the proposed driveway and an existing driveway on South Boylan Avenue, to reduce the minimum driveway spacing between a proposed and existing driveways on West Hargett Street, and for relief from the requirement of cross-access. Here are the 4 findings that must be satisfied in order to grant design alternates for the driveway spacing and cross-access requests. Next, we have 2 design alternate requests related to transparency, and they are to reduce the ground story transparency on the building facade facing South Boylan Street, and to reduce the ground story transparency provided on the building facade facing West Hargett Street. Transparency is required for each side of the building facing a public street, and in this case, a minimum of 66% transparency is required on the ground story, and 50% of that required transparency is required to be located between 3 and 8 feet. And as you know, we have 2 findings that must be satisfied to grant a design alternate related to transparency. Next, we have 2 design alternate requests related to building massing, and they are for relief from the building step back requirement along West Hargett Street, as well as relief from the step back requirement along South Boylan Street, or Boylan Avenue, excuse me. For buildings 13 stories or taller, a minimum of 12-foot step back is required along each side of the building facing a public street. And there are 5 findings that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate for building massing. And lastly, the applicant requests a design alternate from the parking structure screening requirements to allow louvers to screen the parking structure. Per the UDO, the landscaping and screening requirements are intended to provide meaningful and well-designed screening and buffering. And there are 4 findings that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate from the landscaping and screening requirements. I'm available if you have any questions, and I will invite City Transportation representative up to share any remarks that they may have.
Thank you, Casey.
Yep.
Bradley Kimball, Transportation.
Bradley, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
No comments, just letting you know I'm here for any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Letitia Shapiro, and I am an attorney at Morningstar Law Group, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Raleigh Florence Street MMM LLC. At this time, I would like to ask that our application, presentation, and supporting materials be accepted into the record.
Okay.
Thank you. I will be calling 2 witnesses who I tender as experts in the fields of architecture and design to testify this afternoon, Anna Schmitter and Jim Faulkner. And I would like to invite Ms. Schmitter and Mr. Faulkner up to be sworn in. So if you could just please each state your name, address, place of business, education, and experience, along with your role in the project for the commissioners.
Hi, my name is Anna Schmitter. Address is 1900 West Moorhead Street, Suite 200, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28208. BB&M Architecture, and went to UNC Charlotte, and I have a Bachelor of Architecture. And I'm a project architect at BB&M.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
do.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jim Faulkner. I address is 1900 West Moorhead Street, Suite 200, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28208. I'm at BB&M Architecture as well. I have a undergraduate and master's degree in architecture at UNC Charlotte. Have 20 years experience with high-rise of this type, and I am the project manager for this project.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Oop, too far. Okay, so for context, the site is 0.62 acres located at 121 and 131 South Boylan Avenue at the corner of South Boylan Avenue and West Hargett Street. There is an apartment building across the street to the west, Bloomsbury Estates condominiums to the southwest, and Y Hill Brewery across the street to the south. Here you're looking west along Hargett Street, and the proposed building is the lighter color. And as Casey mentioned, we are here presenting several design alternates to facilitate the construction of a multi-use 20-story building that includes ground floor retail, residential apartments, and structured parking. I will run through each design alternate request and present competent material and substantial evidence through expert witnesses that each design alternate request should be granted. The first of our requests is related to transparency, UDO section 1.5.9, with regard to both the South Boylan Avenue facade and the West Hargett Street facade. And what you see here is the overall elevation of both the South Boylan Avenue facade, excuse me, and the West Hargett Street facade. And at this time, I would like to invite Anna Schmitter to provide you with evidence and testimony explaining the design goals and that are driving the transparency and relief we are seeking, including how the requested alternates will increase visual interest along the street.
As Tish mentioned, we are creating visual interest on our facade on the ground floor, and I'll run through a few of those elements. As you can see on this rendering, we are using large-scale masonry block at the pedestrian level and continuing up, as well as cast stone accents and floor-to-ceiling storefront glass windows and doors. We've got double-story masonry pilasters flanking each of the storefront openings, And we've got some planters as well to add to the streetscape and sidewalkscape. And we've got a 10-foot green wall as well on the corner of Hargett. As you can see in the corner there, there's a 10-foot wall, green wall, flanking the stair tower. We've also got some public art that screens the Duke required transformer screening. That'll be louvered and have some public art on it. We've also got outdoor seating as well as covered outdoor seating on the southwest corner facade of Boylan and Hargett, along the corner here, along that right corner that you can see there. That'll be an active restaurant space, seating, planters, greenery, and also a covered outdoor space on the left side you can see there, and that'll have some bike racks and seating as well. And I think that's everything.
One other thing to add to this is we are eroding the corner at Hargett and Boylan Avenue for that seating opportunity. So that does increase the transparency in terms of the openness at that corner, as well as activating the corner of the Hargett Street. We have a dog wash area that also has full light glazing there as well.
Thank you. In addition to transparency, we are also requesting design alternates related to building massing, UDO section 3.3.3, in the form of complete relief from the required minimum 12-foot facade step back. What you see here is the proposed massing showing the requested relief regarding the step back. And while you do see some small setback along all but the central element on South Boylan Street, on the South Boylan Street facade, there's no step back that's proposed. Along the Hargett Street facade, a similar situation exists with a small setback provided except along this vertical element here, with no step back along the western portion of the facade. And as you can see here, the eastern portion of the facade does feature a very significant 90-foot step back at the 8th floor on the eastern portion of the building. And as a reminder, the intent of the building massing regulations is to manage the impact of tall buildings located near the public right-of-way to avoid a canyon effect by providing access to light and air at the street level, and mitigating wind impacts, as well as to produce a consistent street wall and visually reduce the perceived scale of the building. At this time, I would like to invite Ms. Schmitter back up to provide you with evidence and testimony regarding the step-back relief requested, explaining the design goals that are driving the request and relief we are seeking, including how the requested alternates provide an architectural base distinguishable from the building above that enhances the pedestrian environment, describe the proposed building setbacks behind the property line in lieu of the required step back, and the resulting open space that includes pedestrian amenities and what those amenities are. Describe architectural treatments that mitigate wind and light impacts at the pedestrian level that visually reduce the scale of the building and demonstrate that the building does not cause undue shadow impacts on public spaces, amenity areas, and surrounding streets.
So we do have a, with the exception of the stair towers, because it's such a small site, these stair towers do protrude out, but we are providing a 3-foot step back minimum other than those stair towers. So that does give some relief to the building there and the sidewalk. So, and then as you can see also, we have a large 90-foot step back for a amenity terrace with a pool that'll, be a lively space that you can see from down the road. That also adds lighting natural daylight and ventilation to the units on that inner courtyard there. So I'll run through some. So here on this rendering, the proposed building will have architecturally distinguished base, a 2-story base with 5 additional floors of apartments and parking above that base. And the building will provide screening of the parking. So we've got residence units screening the parking along Boylan, and along Hargett, we have screening as well of some units, and then also louvers that provide screening, architectural louvers. And then we've got a dog spa and outdoor seating screening the parking at the ground levels. And through fenestration of materials and rhythm, and as well as the unit balconies, that creates a varying patterns of glass and masonry materials. As I said, level 8 will house an amenity program visible from Hargett Street with an extensive setback of the pool courtyard. So that's that. And then as for the shadow studies, so the building does not cause any undue shadow impacts on the public spaces or adjacent buildings more than the existing building next door does. It doesn't exist yet, but when it is built, we won't cause any other large shadow impacts. Anything you want to add, Jim?
So we made sure during this design is from a wind impact, we stayed in plane with the Block 83 building and not creating too much of a step back as well. That can create certain vortex effects when you do have large step backs of these buildings. Also, as well, we are creating some relief on the street facade with these 2 small pocket park type areas, one at the connection at Block 83, and as well as what I mentioned earlier at the corner where we have the restaurant seating. But as Anna did mention, again, with the proposed adjacent Block 83 building, we are not creating any additional impacts on the shadow on the street.
Can I just ask for a little clarification? When you're speaking of the Block 83, could you clarify if you're talking about the gray area that's been illustrated or the building that exists called Block 83?
The gray area that's in the rendering.
Yeah,
okay.
Being proposed for
you.
that site.
Which is not there now, right? Okay.
That's why we say yes.
Proposed.
And has that design been approved? Do they have permits for that?
Is the gray building approved?
I am not sure.
Yeah.
The gray building is not approved. No.
It is not approved. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead. We'll have our older questions. I just wanted to clarify the Block 83 because some people might think they're talking about the existing Block 83.
So additionally, we are seeking a design alternate to permit screening by utilizing louvers instead of materials set forth in UDO section 7.2.5.f.2a. At this time, I would like to call Anna to provide you with the evidence and testimony regarding the requested relief of the structured parking screening materials, and will explain the design goals that are driving this request, that the proposed louvers provide an effective visual screening and will have no impact on the safe vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site, demonstrate the alternate does not substantially negatively impact the comfort and safety of pedestrians, and describe how the approved alternate will utilize other architectural or landscaping treatments to create visual interest, and that the alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard.
Okay. The use of louvers on our building instead of the material set forth in section 7.2.5 F.2a will create visual interest by providing a change in material, texture, and rhythm compared to the surrounding buildings, surrounding materials on the buildings. The louvers will be a painted color that complements the surrounding materials, and it also that also complements the surrounding materials with and a variety of other measures such as green walls and public art to enhance visual interest. We have all that. So the louvers will add ventilation in addition to our mechanically ventilated deck. It also helps block out some car headlights, but we are providing a crash barrier as well, the required crash barrier that is solid. Anything to add to that?
No, it's just the rhythm and the language provides a punched opening look that's being mimicked with our storefront system on the main facade of the structure. So in lieu of a storefront type system, we are proposing that louver just so we can get added ventilation as well as, allowing protection of the vehicles inside the space. Plus, the louvers start above the visual grade plane. We're well above like level 2, level 3 before those louvers actually start.
Just for clarification, they're the gray squares in the rendering we're
Correct.
looking
And to clarify, we also have a little bit of louver at the Duke required screening for the transformer at the ground floor, but that is covered with public art, and we're proposing, public art on that screening element, which could be louvers.
So the transformers in question on those, that is considered an interior vault type condition where we have blast walls and whatnot, and Duke requires us to screen that. So that's where we think this is the best opportunity to do this with art, with the required louver type screening there.
And I just have one question for you for clarity on why this would be equal to or better than the standard.
Per what we said, it creates a visual interest, and just as much as a perforated panel, this creates just as much visual interest and, creates, goes along with the materials surrounding it.
Are you talking about the louvers of the parking
Yes.
parking deck, or the colored the art louvers of the
This
Duke
will be for
Energy,
both.
or just everything in general?
This will be for both, because the parking louvers in the garage in particular is we are mimicking the language of the building itself. So in terms of the punched opening effect, whether it be louvers or another material, we think the louvers is the best material option for this.
And that would effectively screen the parking without impact to pedestrians.
Yes, since it's one elevated at level 3 and up, as well as Anna mentioned, we do have a crash barrier up blocking all headlights. So you're not getting that light pollution that's being forced out. So that's also being blocked from within the deck.
Great, thank you. Our final design alternate requests relate to flexibility regarding the configuration of driveways along South Boylan Avenue and West Hargett Street, and the requirements of UDO Section 8.3.5C.3C, as well as complete relief from the cross-access requirement of UDO Section 8.3.5. And at this time, I would like to call Jim Faulkner to provide you with evidence and testimony regarding the requested relief specific to minimum driveway spacing and cross-access requirements, demonstrating that the alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety, that it does not conflict with the approved or built roadway adjacent to or in the vicinity of the site, and that the alternate is deemed reasonable due to factors 4A, B, and D of the design alternate findings.
In terms of the driveway spacing, we maximized the corner between Boyle and Hargett on purpose, so we would not have any potential stacking issues with that intersection. That was our primary concern, as well as the firefighting access along Boylan Avenue. and our conversations with the fire marshal's office about the best location for fire command. We did push the one ingress location on Boylan Avenue, Plan South, where you see where it's on the plan now, due to the proposed fire command location. But this information has been vetted and gone through with the fire marshal's office of Raleigh. As for the cross access, due to the small size of our site, we're at 0.6 acres, we need to develop every square inch of this site for proper development and yield of this project, for function of use, and due to the proximity of the location of the property lines, we needed to essentially yield out to the edge in terms of cross access.
So in summary, as with other constrained downtown sites, a handful of design alternates are necessary to produce usable residential units as well as safe access at this corner location, resulting in the need for unique building treatments. And we're open to any questions, but thank you.
Thank you. It looks like there may be some members from the public. We will now hear from other individuals wishing to provide factual testimony concerning the request. As a reminder, witnesses should provide factual testimony as to how this project does or does not meet the applicable standards. The commission must base its decisions upon evidence in the record, not personal preference or opinion. Could you please introduce yourself? Hello. Introduce yourself and your relation to the case and your address.
My name is Elizabeth Hofelt. I live catty corner in the condo, 710 Independence Place. And we have spoke with Mr. Coleman. Let's see, there he is. And Molly Stewart.
Okay. Before you get started, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, great.
Mostly I have questions because I'm not versed in this whole language of experts, but I have some questions that maybe you can clarify or the experts can. One is that the relief that is being provided will face the future dead end of Hargett Street. It will not provide any relief along Boylan Avenue.
What relief?
When they talk about the building mass relief, and again, I'm not an expert, so I may be misunderstanding, but what I see the relief is the balcony with the pool looking on downtown, and where there will be a dead end when the S line comes through. So that's not really helping anyone's line. That's just going to be a dead end street. But Boylan Avenue, we could use some relief. The properties across the street are also trying to get to 20-story, and Mr. Coleman owns more properties across the street as well as another one that's there. So they're building a cave down this Boylan Avenue, and I mean, we did vote in support of it. We did have conversations, and he did do a beautiful wrap around the corner that is catty corner to R06, trying to help with some of the lights coming to the garage. That is something that I believe you said in your conversation you would try to do. So I don't know if those louvers that are up high, not over the Duke Energy thing, but over the parking garage, are those going to provide relief from the light coming into, the condo across the way? Am I reading that wrap correctly?
You're talking about the Bloomsbury condos? Okay.
So, because they're facing Y Hill, but they're a little bit further down Hargett, so I can't tell how they will hit our building. Is this something that's considered?
Yeah, we can, I'm going to note your questions.
Sure.
And then if you have other ones, we'll
I do. Okay,
we'll
thank you.
have them come up and try and answer all the questions.
Thank
since
you.
We don't have the answers.
Okay, so the question was on those parking garage louvers coming into the Hargett-facing part of our condo, and then also a question on where is the relief on Boylan. I see there's some.
From
This
the
is
step
beautiful. This is relief. Relief means space. That's what I think of when I see relief from the massive building. Am I understanding that?
So you're concerned that because there's no step back, that you're getting a kind of canyon effect. Is that,
I don't
is that-
really
do I understand that
understand
correctly?
what that step back would be, but I hear that they're asking not to have it because
Yes.
they've opened up the back and they've provided some space on the bottom floor, which I think is what's required. And I'm just wondering, can there be more relief on Boylan?
On the bottom floor.
I don't know. Where can it be so we're not living in a cave walking down that street, you know? But I do, commend that this is a nice-looking project, so I just have some concerns. So I'm trying to, this proposed property next to them, which was the whole motivation that they couldn't build their original 7-story, but it had to go 20-story. I thought it had been approved, and that's why they had to go to 20-story, and that's why to get up over that 7-story garage where their pool is overlooking downtown. But I also know that property next to them, they kind of carved it all up. First, they did the hotel, then they did the building that's going to be designed to be adjacent to them on Boylan, and then they carved up the parking garage that wasn't submitted with the original plan but was added in later. That is this big yellow thing you see. I don't know how you get back to it on Hargett.
You can
behind
switch
this
the,
building.
the
Can you show me how to show that pool? And the parking. So, yeah, how do I point at this? Oh, there. That's a 7-story parking garage that's not there yet. And that's why they had to go up 20 stories so that, their people that live there can not be looking at a parking garage. But it doesn't exist. I don't know when and if it ever will. And then also the building to the side of them. Okay, so this building to the side of them, basically they carved up that block. First they did their hotel, then they got their design approved for this 20-story thing on Boylan, and then they just kind of slipped this parking garage in after. And I guess since it was 7 stories and it's DX7, they didn't have to get it approved, but they didn't show it as part of their design. So there's this kind of cutting up that I'm noticing happening some. And so there's no chance, I'm starting to get exhausted. Should I stop? Do you want to start talking? Okay, so I guess the thing is, when I was looking at the design for the one next to him, there's already several of these driveway exceptions that have to be made. So I'm just wondering, how many driveways are there on South Boylan Avenue between this development and the one that's proposed next to him that we're going to have to navigate, including the loading, whatever, all the different ways that cars can be coming and going. Let's see. So I'm looking at the cumulative effect. And the cross-access requirement, I've heard this several times, that in the warehouse district, it's just like that's not something that's done, like when we came here and we heard about the Legends project, but I don't understand why not. Why can't we have like a livable space downtown? Like, why can't we walk free from encumbrances? But if I understand correctly, that cross-access agreement is supposed to be a shared driveway between both properties to limit the number of driveways, and they didn't coordinate this way, so instead there's all these driveways. Why is that being allowed? What is this piecemeal stuff happening? And what is it about the existing, let's see. This is related to those driveways, and what is it about the existing physical environment that makes compliance unfeasible? Like, I don't understand, what does that statement mean? So people find these small, or they own these small pieces of land downtown, and then they want to build a tall building on it, and then they say, we're in a small space. So then they want, so if these things aren't needed, why are they in the UDO or the comprehensive plan? Why do we keep waiving them? Let's see. It says that the compliance is not compatible with adjacent use. I don't understand why isn't it compatible? I'm just following the little, do you know what I'm talking about? Are you familiar with this language? Because I'm not. So a smaller development could have been chosen. I already said that. Why make the concession? And what is the visual interest offsetting the reduction in transparency? Can we talk about that? I see the green wall, and I do appreciate, because we did ask for more greenery, and they gave us a green wall there in the corner. And I see the beautiful, Duke Energy mural cover. But how does that, what is the other visual interests that you experts and these experts can speak to that's there for this reduction in transparency? I'm guessing what's taking up space is the driveways and the garage entries. That's why they can't get that space. And I don't understand the step back. Can you explain to me, or someone, an expert, what is this 12-foot step back? What would that look like if it were going to be there? Where would that be changed? Where would we see that along Boylan?
Mr. Chair, while she's looking at her next one, I just want to remind the commission that in a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing, your witnesses give factual testimony. With respect to asking questions, the applicant, any party that has standing that's participating as a party can cross-examine witnesses, but otherwise they're limited to giving factual testimony. So to the extent that the board would like to hear, and then if you have any questions from this that you'd like to ask the applicant, you could do that. But I just want to make sure we're clear on what type of testimony is relevant and admissible.
I think I understand. You're saying I can't ask for my questions to be answered, but I can raise the questions to you to do with what you might. Is that correct?
Generally, yes, and it's in the board and the chair's discretion as to how far they want to go with that.
I understand.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I think that's about everything. Thank you for your time. Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Peter Gabor. I live at 710 Independence Place, Bloomsbury Estates.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, you can
Thank
proceed.
you. So just to talk a little bit more about the questions that my friend Elizabeth, also someone that owns a condominium in that building, raised. And I would like to state some facts, since evidently there's a problem asking questions. So here are some facts. Look at the picture. That building with the red plotch on it not only has not been built, but it was owned by the same people that owned the property immediately north of this development, Heritage Properties, Glenwood 3 LLC, who owned the property at the corner of Morgan and Boylan and applied in May of 2020 to rezone that to 20 stories, which was granted. 18 is what they're proposing to build at some time. At that time, they also owned that white building, which doesn't exist. In other words, they owned the property through Glenwood 3 LLC, but did not include in their application in May 2020 that any development for a 7-story parking deck at that location. Now, the reason we are dealing with a 20-story building is because many of us didn't get involved in this actively enough, and the city council perhaps wasn't aware of these facts. Now, what actually happened was that on the 9th of September 2021, Neary Coleman, the people that are proposing to build the 20-story building, put forward an ASR to build a 7-story building on that site. One day later, on the 10th of September, the people that owned that property put forward an application to build a 7-story parking deck on that site, the one that's marked, making it impossible to build a 7-story building because the entire 7 stories would have been overshadowed by that parking deck on the east and the 18-story buildings on the north, right? These are facts. And we can't reopen, evidently, the rezoning case, but we need to take these facts into consideration when we are looking at the overall block between Morgan and Hargett along Boylan East, where you have an 18-story buildings being proposed. North of this, where you have the 7-story parking deck that apparently, as far as I know, has been withdrawn. I'm not sure whether it was ever going to be built. These are facts. The fact is that the ASR on the 9th of September to build the original 7-story building was signed by the same professional engineer of the same firm that signed the ASR on the 10th for Glenwood 3 LLC to build this 7-story freestanding parking deck, which is the reason why we have 20 stories. Those are all facts. That doesn't mean we can undo it, but I think we need to look at this in the context of that entire block. So what I would ask the Appearance Commission to look at is how we can coordinate, or whether it can be coordinated in terms of things like ingress and egress on Boylan Avenue, because that is important. And evidently, there's some, how am I going to phrase this? There's some conversations that may have gone on, I don't know this, on this entire subject. And so it would not be inappropriate to ask that the Appearance Commission keep this in mind, even though we don't know what's going to be built immediately north of there. We do know that the 7-story parking deck, there don't seem to be any firm plans to build this, which is the casus belli that ended up generating a 20-story building. The Hargett Street is going to be closed when the high-speed rail line is being built between Raleigh and Richmond, because the level crossings cannot be put in because of the federal funding. That's also a factor in terms of where cars and service vehicles come out, because if they're not going to be able to turn left because they will run into a wall on Hargett, they can only go right, 50 or 100 feet? That's also a factor. So I'm asking the Appearance Commission to look at all of the facts of this case and to look at the planning of things like ingress and egress service vehicles with this in mind, that there is going to be eventually, even though there's not going to be a 7-story parking deck apparently, there will be an 18-story buildings built immediately north. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Would the applicant like to offer a rebuttal or additional information after hearing public comment?
Good evening, Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, part of the legal team representing the applicant in this case. Yes, we've heard a lot, so I'll take them one by one. We had a question earlier, first just to clarify something, which was whether the Block 83 project has been approved. The answer then was no, but it's a little more subtle than that. It has the zoning to build the height that drove this request. So that zoning was approved. The site plan, there is no approved site plan at this point. So just to clarify that situation.
Molly, can you indicate which volumes you're speaking of when
Yes.
on this image when you're referring to the Block 83?
Absolutely. So I don't know where this, I think the slide is all the way back at the beginning. So it here actually shows the gray buildings
So is
here.
the gray including the parking garage? It's all
So
of the
the
gray.
zoning supports all of that today.
The
That's right.
zoning, yeah. Which is the 20-story rezoning.
I'm sorry?
Which is the 20-story rezoning? Is that what you're
Correct. So
referring to?
the portion shown here as taller than this building.
And
Correct.
no ASR has been submitted for anything in the gray.
I understand it was, I believe it is expired or withdrawn.
We heard a design alternate and approved a design alternate for the gray.
That is also correct, and I understand that would have to be resubmitted if they wanted that again, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Can we just clarify, when you're saying the gray is zoned for 20 stories, that, and people are calling it the parking deck, that could be anything? That could be 20
correct.
stories as well?
So the gray is zoned for what's shown here.
Okay.
So I don't believe that parking deck is zoned for 20.
Okay. And that's not required to be a parking deck? But it's,
That's
but
my
that's not, yeah, but that is, I just wanted to be clear that that is not zoned for 20 stories where that lower level is shown.
Not to my knowledge. It's not part of our request. The second, I guess, major request that we heard was with respect to building massing. We heard a statement that there isn't relief on the Boylan Avenue side. I would simply remind the commission that we've heard competent, substantial, and material evidence on each of the 5 standards for granting a design alternate on that point. And those largely, many of them refer back to the questions of light and air, wind impact, shadow, creating a consistent street wall, and visually reducing the perceived scale of the building through architectural treatments. You did hear expert opinion on each of those questions, as well as the shadow study and additional materials submitted to describe how each of those standards is met. We have not heard any substantial material and competent evidence rebutting that information. So if it cannot be rebutted, then the standards have been satisfied. I'll come back to the question about the parking louvers and whether they block light kind of to the side, because I'll want to turn to our experts for that question. With respect to the cross-access question, we heard why is it in the UDO if it's often not applied downtown? And it is true, it is often not applied downtown due to the small lots, due to the intensive uses on the first floors of each of those buildings that have many roles to serve. In this case, this building especially is serving many uses because unlike many downtown buildings, here we'll have loading and trash removal inside the building. So many of those functions occur outside of buildings downtown. Here, all of that will be taking place inside the building, making the interior flow quite difficult to design and difficult to do that cross-access. The same rule does apply citywide, and it does make more sense in many other locations in the city where we're simply providing access between different parking lots that are adjacent to each other, and there's no reason that traffic shouldn't flow without re-entering the right-of-way. So a little bit different situation than here in downtown. We heard that a smaller development could have been chosen to meet all these standards. I just want to remind the commission that this is not one of the standards to be met in granting a design alternate. We have addressed the standards for a design alternate here today. With that, I will invite Mr. Faulkner back up to discuss the question of the parking louvers and light.
So is the question whether or not the louvers will block light into the adjacent condo area? Caddy corner? Yeah, so the louvers will be installed at an angle, and actually that they perform better than a perf panel with small holes in it that allow a certain amount of light in and out. The louvers will actually block more car light, as well as we mentioned, we have a crash barrier, so cars don't actually. We don't have a cable rail barrier system. So what that means is we have a concrete crash rail which prevents headlights, that light going through directly. So you'll never see a direct headlight beam.
Yeah, and I just want to bring up one more element. We've screened the parking deck with units on the Boylan side, so that is actually a add and nice feature that we are providing there.
Can you describe those louvers a little better? I'm not clear if they're solid, if they're perforated, if there's any gap between them.
There would be. So it's an aluminum base louver, so it's a slat type base system, And so there'll be overlap.
Okay.
Allow air convection through for airflow, and then we'll have a bird screen behind it, of course, so birds can't get in and out or in. But yes, it's there. There is overlap, so there's not ever a case where you could see directly through.
So looking straight on, you would not be able to see through it, but looking down, you would be able to see into it.
Well, looking down on it, if you're up high, adjacent, you will not be able to see down into it. Looking up, you would be able to see some daylight or see some light from the garage into.
Okay, so the louvers are angled down to the outside.
So it angled down, so watershed.
Got it.
So you're looking at, I guess, I think we called it an architectural louver. I would say it's also very similar to what we would see in mechanical ventilation.
Absolutely.
As well.
Very similar.
And you said that deck is mechanically ventilated?
It is. Since we are limited on just having this one facade, due to code, due to our openness requirements, we have to have fans for this.
And just out of curiosity, any reason why you didn't use one of the other approved materials that's part of the UDO and decided to use these louvers?
We honestly think that this has less light output from inside the garage. The perf panels allow way more light.
Fair enough. Molly, did you have anything else, or were you? Okay.
Could I ask you to elaborate your case on cross-access with the understanding of the facts that the public presented?
And can I add to that? Because
Yeah.
did you guys present the cross-access
Yes.
part? Okay, I totally missed that.
Oh, say it. Go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
No, go ahead, Molly.
Sure, and I actually missed the last part of what you said. You said with respect to the facts.
That were presented by the public.
Facts with respect to cross-access?
Yeah.
I don't recall what those were.
Well, so the gentleman laid out the different property ownership and rezonings and ASRs all on similar properties. I wondered if you had any input related to cross-access based on what he stated, or you could just talk about your case relating to cross-access.
Fair. I'm just struggling because I don't know what cases we're referring to and exactly what was approved where. I am familiar with many cases, as I'm sure many of you are as well, where cross-access has been let go in the downtown area for these reasons, just because when you do have these taller buildings on smaller lots, there's so many services that need to happen on that first floor. All the access happens there. You've got the retail and you're trying to make everything nice at the street and then take care of a lot of difficult activities within that first floor. And so very often this is the first to go. When this was first designed, as you heard, there had in fact also been a design alternate granted for to not have cross access from the building that surrounds on two sides. I understand that's no longer applicable, but it was done, and it's kind of something that we understood. You know, it's needed regardless of that, but in fact, it is common enough that in fact we wouldn't have been able to connect at that point. And now today we just have the challenges of actually bringing in things that are typically outside that building and happening on the street. We're bringing that loading in. We're bringing the trash service inside the building.
Do you mind if I add a couple of things?
Please.
So
Do you have anything? Hold on. I know one of our members has to leave. I just want to make sure he has an opportunity to ask any questions that might be helpful. Dane, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you have to leave right now. So.
Why do you why no setback on Boylan Avenue? Why no 12-foot setback on Boylan Avenue? Why do you need to be flush?
Sure. Great question. So there are a couple of things going on there. One, there is a 3-foot setback of the building. There's not a step back.
So is it not 12 feet, so you still have 9 to go?
Well, so the setback, it happens at the ground level, and the step back is something that happens higher in the building.
Right, I'm talking about up.
Right, and we have 0 step back and 3-foot setback, right? So the challenge here, so there are a couple of things going on, and they are geometric, right? So one thing that was a high priority for this site was to make sure, especially in Boylan Avenue, that the parking was screened by residential units. So fitting those units in there, having the geometry that you need to put those in there. Also, the parking behind comes with a very inflexible geometry as far as how wide the drive aisles are, how the parking spaces work, and when you put those puzzle pieces together, you end up with no step back.
Yeah, I get it. I would be very concerned about the canyoning effect on Boylan. Thank you for excusing me.
Thanks.
Also wanted to add a couple of comments on the cross-axis, if that's okay. So again, in conversations with the fire marshal's office, we did get approval, so we don't have a lot of wall open or a lot of blank wall on Boylan. We did move the fire pump down into the basement level, the quote-unquote basement level. That was also to get more transparency on Boylan, as well as behind, instead of also incurring more louver space on Hargett, we pushed the generator behind the transformer block, which again increases the amount of space we're using on the basement level for services. So we do have our air intake outtake is coming on separate louvers above the main parking garage entrance, or the service entrance on Hargett, but just wanted to add that information.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to, building on what Dane said, and I know he had to leave, so what I heard you say, Molly, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, is there, you kind of get squeezed because you're trying to put residential units, have enough space to put the Lego block of residential units up against that parking garage, right? Up to the 7th floor. So, and I guess, can you just clarify why you can't step back after the 7th floor in that scenario? So, because it makes sense what you said about the up to the 7th floor, but.
I think this is a better question for our designers.
Great.
So there's a number of reasons, mainly incurred by our servicing of the building, whether it's our elevator cores, our egress stair cores, which we have since our high-rise requirements, and also the biggest factor is our structural requirements. For this is all of a post-tension concrete slab. Those columns would then protrude if we push that whole upper block back an additional 9 feet. Columns would be in the middle of drive aisles down on the parking garage below.
So, I mean, I'm sure I've seen a podiumed building that steps back.
Right, but
Can you
on
help
a
me
podium,
understand what the difference is here?
podium style building is more of a wood structure. This is a concrete high rise all the way up.
Okay, so concrete high rises can't step back if they have parking garages below them.
They can in certain requirements, but that adds a lot of complexity to the design. And I think that the units along Hargett or Boylan would have to be removed to allow parking right up against the street there.
Okay, thank you.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the ground story? I mean, we're looking at these elevations, can't really read the text. I know you guys have seen it a lot, but for us who are looking at this, I don't know what all this is that I'm looking at. I know there's an access aisle on this facade, and there's some artwork. The corner looks like it's kind of tucked back, but can you just elaborate what's around on the other Boylan side as well, and what those different elements are, and maybe even in plan, how those interact?
Sure. We can start on Boylan here. So going from the left to right, we have an open area cut out at the far left there, and then as you go down, you have the drive aisle entry. And I'll go into the plan if you want to see that as well, but the drive aisle entry that goes up to the upper levels of the deck. And then as you go around, you have the entrances for all the leasing offices and the lobby, as well as restaurant and retail entrances as needed there. And then on the far right, we have the outdoor restaurant seating area. And then some other things that are called out are just some of the storefront, building entry, signage locations, planters, those kind of elements. And then you can see a little bit of the green wall on the corner there from Boylan as well. So then as you wrap around, we've got the
Point to the green wall. I'm not
green
seeing
wall there.
it. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep. So you will be able to see a bit of the green wall. Great. The green wall here on the corner. So that will wrap a little bit around the corner. So you get a glimpse of that. So as we wrap around, you have the restaurant seating that wraps that whole corner. You've got the green wall and the stair tower with building signage. And then here we have restaurant seating as well, an additional cutout. I'll go into plan and show you how deep that is. But then as we go down, louvers, public art for the screening, and then the parking entrance there. And then at the corner, we've activated the corner with a dog wash here. That includes storefront, glass, transparent. So I'll go.
Are both driveway access points for the parking deck, or is one of them service related?
Yeah, so the one here on Boylan, that one services the upper levels of the deck. And the one on Hargett here, that one is more service-based. So that will house all the trash requirements, the generator, a lot of mechanical equipment, and more of a service entry for the restaurant.
And
It'll also-
ADA accessible parking's down there too,
Yes,
correct?
yes. We also have additional parking for the retail tenant, as well as, again, like Anna mentioned, all trash pickup, as well as move-in deliveries for the actual, instead of any parking on the street for move-ins, that all happens at that level.
Do those interconnect at all?
They do not.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's a plan showing along Hargett, that entry there, and trash at the back, and plan north, fire pump, riser rooms, maintenance, generators, all kind of tucked in there, as well as the lobby for the entry to the elevators, and guest parking and additional parking. And bike storage as well in the corner down there, upper left corner. So that's level B plan. Level 1 plan here, you can see the entrance entering on Boylan there. That goes up and services the rest of the deck above. And here is the open spaces right here and right here. So we've got a pretty large as well as up there. So 3 main open areas, pretty deep, that allow for light to get in deeper to the building and stops the canyon or the wind canyon effect, kind of breaks up that wind tunnel.
Are those accessible from the sidewalk or only from inside the building?
It depends.
I think there's a pretty good grade change there, right?
Yeah. So the corner here is a little bit built up. It'll be possibly partly accessible from the sidewalk, but probably be a railing around that
I think you have a
area.
rendering of that illustrates what we're looking
Yeah, I'm
at.
really looking at the one.
Let me know
yeah,
if you
kinda on the right of the
want me to
stairs
go
there.
back.
I don't think that would really be.
Okay.
Could you show us that rendering? Yeah. Thank you. That's the, is that the second opening or that's the?
That's
so
just
there's
the
another opening.
corner.
That's
Mhm,
down.
the
On
second
the
one.
other side of the stairwell.
There was another rendering that I saw that
see.
showed it a little better.
Yeah, there it is, right there.
Yeah.
That's the other one. That one, but because of the grade change, we do have to have a rail on that. The one corner, depending on the restaurant use, of course, we may have to do a rail on ABC permits. So.
So what's happening in that opening? Is that restaurant seating?
Yes, open seating for
It's open.
restaurant.
That's the second one further down.
Both.
Both would be.
Okay. Cool.
And then just I'll bring up the other one, which is, let's see if we've got it. Yeah. Okay. So on the right here is the other one that will be open to the public and be more bike storage and seating areas that'll be completely open.
I have another question for Molly. So Molly, we heard that all of the adjacent properties have the same ownership, and you all are showing kind of building massings adjacent to this, but you're not providing cross-access to any of those buildings with same ownership. Can you talk about why that's not feasible in this scenario where it seems like I couldn't imagine a more feasible situation where you have the same ownership and you're suggesting that similar buildings will be built, but not providing cross-access?
This property is not in the same ownership as those properties.
It's not under the same ownership.
Just confirm that.
Is that correct? Okay, so I just
It is not.
misunderstood
No,
that.
those surrounding parcels are in common ownership.
Those are common ownership. Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, look at that. Clears it up. So have you all approached the other, the big ownership of the big massings around it to see about cross-access? Has that been explored? It seems like there's some opportunities to connect to the parking deck.
So
in a
I
way that
haven't
would-
been involved in those conversations, if any, but like I said, I do know that when they were in design, they were proceeding on a plan that did not have cross-access, and they got a design alternate to proceed in that direction.
Okay. Okay, so it already happened the other way.
They came before us, and we
Correct.
we granted them.
It was granted.
Without
Oh, and now we're seeing the other side
cross-access.
of it. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. They stated at the time that they had not had conversations with the adjacent, that they had attempted but had no conversations with the adjacent tenant, so they didn't want to rely on that.
Thank you.
I see. Anybody else have any questions at this point? All right.
Sorry, I want to go back to the step back. I think what I heard is if they were to do the step back, that it would have structural implications on the garage, because essentially you'd have to take everything above that. What was it, 8th floor? I think it is
Floor, yeah.
7th floor, and push it all back, right? So your structural columns on that back side then have to come down through the parking deck, which I totally understand, and there's challenges with it. I feel like that's doable though, and so I need to hear a little bit more of why that's not achievable.
And there is a line of columns already there, roughly 10 feet inside the front facade of the building. So at least on Boylan, it's in the plan.
So what comes up is when you do that transfer condition, when you bring everything back, yes, there is a line of columns proposed there at the moment, but when you bring everything back, that affects everything from that amenity level up in terms of, we have a pool up there, all those weights, we have transfer conditions that will start to get imposed. So what happens there is when we start to introduce transfer beams, we start to get 10 to 12 to 14 foot deep transfer beams to try to alleviate that and still make the parking garage work.
And is there a reason you can't just narrow the building? I mean, instead of shifting it back, just narrow it to show a step back or include a step back?
Well, in terms of getting the units to actually function, though.
Yeah, the module of the unit is pretty, we're kind of already at that small module of unit, and making those smaller.
It's a very efficient floor plate.
Can you show the level of the pool?
Sorry, while we have this graphic up, I just wanted to show you the 12-foot step back and what that looks like, and why we think that having the units in front is a better outcome for the street than this ledge. I'm sorry, and you were looking for the pool?
Yeah, the 8th level, I guess, the level of the amenity deck.
So is that the best? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
The step back would be above the height of the parking deck, though, right? Or it could be. I mean, it's not. Yeah, so you could still have units in front of the parking deck and then step back above the parking deck, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
I think part of what they're saying is that they could have stacked the apartments entirely on top of the parking deck and instead chose to pull it down. And that's part of this.
Do you have a floor plan of the upper levels?
I'm not sure if one was included in this.
Yes, we've got one.
Is it's showing an L shape, right?
Yep.
That's part of your structure. So what they're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, is I mean if you push back the units along Boylan, you're going to lose units in the middle, right? You've got to lose units because that L has to get shorter, right?
So it's a functional loss of square footage.
Now it could become a T or something, but then
Whatever,
you would lose. You're going to lose something because you're going to lose glass space, and you're going to lose amenity space.
And some light as well. If we push this back, you're kind of closer to the adjacent building, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I just can't speak enough on the structural implications for that shift, though.
And I'm just looking, I guess try not to redesign it, but more subjectively. If you look at the findings for the step back, it says if the approved alternate proposes a building setback behind the sidewalk in lieu of the required step back, the resulting open space includes pedestrian amenities such as seating areas, trees, landscaping, or outdoor dining, which we're not getting with 3 feet of setback. And so really they're just, they're asking for complete relief of the step back without really providing a setback.
Typically, yeah, what we've seen in the past is they would provide that setback for that full depth.
Even if it's under a colonnade, right? Even if it's under a colonnade where there's some amenity space open to the public.
Might I clarify something on that?
Yeah.
So that requirement, so there are the 5 standards for this design alternate. That one doesn't require the setback. It says if there is a setback, it has certain items in it. And so that's the standard that we've provided evidence on
Can you
today.
flip to that? That was in the findings, right?
Correct. We were all the way at the end. Let's see, we are in. It's number 3.
So say what you said before.
Sure. So this standard doesn't require that there be a setback. It says that if we are proposing any setback that sort of tends to make up for this, that it contains certain items.
And you were not proposing that 3 feet as a setback in lieu of the step back.
Certainly partly in lieu of, yes. But it is not a one-for-one replacement. But because there is a setback, we wanted to show in our findings that these amenities that are required to be in it are included. So that was kind of the narrow focus of what we've provided.
So they're included, but they're not included in the setback. 3-foot setback.
Right. So many of them are. We have certain
in the 3 feet.
items within there. Yeah.
Okay, so I have some follow-up then for that.
Sure.
So your position is that the architectural detail, the open corners, and the visual interest at the base level counts as the pedestrian amenities that are provided because there is this 3-foot setback instead of the step back. Is that correct?
Correct. We want to show that we provided them.
Right.
That's right.
So the problem that I have with that is that the pedestrian amenities that were identified, so seating areas, the seating area that was really identified was one that would potentially be a railed-in enclosed dining space. So that's not really a pedestrian amenity because that's not something that's accessible to just pedestrians on the street, right? The other open corner on Boylan in particular is, so we have a corner that we believe would be open to pedestrians themselves. And then the rest of Boylan that was, as we kind of did that left to right walkthrough, is covered by a garage, ingress and egress, and then storefronts. I'm not seeing how those count as the pedestrian amenities, such as seating areas, trees, and landscaping that are listed here.
Sure. So obviously that's not a finite list. So, we have in that area, I know there's public art, there's the green wall in that area, and I will turn to the designers.
And if we can be specific about Boylan, right? I understand that there's a green wall that we'd be able to see the edge of on Boylan, but the green wall is on Hargett. The dog washing station is on Hargett. So I would like to hear more about the public amenities for Boylan Street.
Yeah, we've got planters at the entrances. We have canopies that, protect pedestrians from the rain. And we do have trees along the streetscape that's included in the civil package.
We also have bike storage up on the planned north side at Fire Command, as well as we can have some outdoor seating there as well.
Okay.
Just to kind of build on that it says amenities such as seating areas, trees, and landscaping or outdoor dining. Could you show me the landscaping, the trees and landscaping that are not code required, that would be seen as something that was in addition to code required landscaping that would be providing amenity to pedestrians in replacement of the setback or the step back?
Well, here along Boylan, we do have a pot program there that's for additional plantings. And certainly once, everything is fleshed out, we can provide additional plantings there, if you can go back to that image. At the small area at where the Fire Command is in the bike parking, there is also an additional planting as well as landscaping there as well.
Okay.
There is a tree in front of the driveway that won't be there, probably.
Or a bench.
In the middle of the bench.
Cross that out.
Oh, and the light pole.
Street light pole.
And a light pole.
On the corner, I think we do show some planting as well in this little planting box.
Does anybody else have any other questions at this time?
No. Well, question now.
I recall a little bit of addressing wind vortex. Can you just talk briefly through how you address wind impact on the Boylan side?
Right, so the proposed building, that's not approved, we understand. Right now, it is being proposed at the same face point as our structure. So to mitigate any potential wind tunnel effects, what we try to do is try to keep the buildings in line where we can. If we try to step our building back too much, you'll create a wall effect, it's almost like a sail, and you'll create a vortex effect between two high-rise structures. But to mitigate any potential wind at level 1, that small little pocket park at the Fire Command helps break some of that space up. So while there may be a little bit higher velocity up at level 3 and 4, down at level 1, it's not. It's broken apart. If the whole building was stepped back, we would get a much greater effect.
So can you, similarly, can you speak to the canyon effect that could occur if another tall building was put across on the other side of Boylan? Because that's something that we need to be thinking about.
Well, depending, we would need to see light studies in the proposed building and what that would entail. Without knowing what that is, we can't really, address that at this time.
And I have just another clarification on the fourth criteria for the building mass, is that the building uses other architectural treatments to mitigate wind impacts, which I think I addressed, increased light at pedestrian level, which I also think you addressed, but also that it visually reduces the scale of the building. Can you speak more to how you're designing
address
Correct.
that
So
part.
Anna can speak to more of this as well. So this is really the key facade here. So from a pedestrian level, we have certain horizontal breaks and canopies and we break the rhythm of the structure up before we get to the main residential units. So we're creating interest from the facade all the way up to around level 9. And that's what's breaking the main facade apart.
Thank you.
So it looks like we have a question from the public.
I want to say briefly that we appreciate the apartments in the front and it not being a parking garage, because everywhere we look, we're looking at a parking garage. So we greatly appreciate that and the wrapping. But the other thing I want to say about this wind, and I don't understand if the design of the building next to it has been pulled. Why is that even in consideration? Because this is being designed, and they're going to have to put in a new design. So this should be designed in the best way, and the next person who comes, they can deal with the wind tunnel effect. That's my.
Great. Thank you.
I'll just note that the design that was proposed did comply with zoning and is in the downtown area the most likely outcome in any event.
Which design?
The zero lot line design that was proposed is permitted by zoning.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any final comments?
No.
Okay, great, thank you.
I've got one more question, if that's
One
all
more
right.
question.
For Bradley, just so we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, do you have any concern over the driveway spacing requests?
Bradley Kimball, Transportation Department. No concerns.
Hey, while you're up here, I don't know whether it'll come up during our deliberation, but has there been a decision made in terms of closing of Hargett Street?
Closing the what? I'm sorry?
Hargett Street.
Hargett Street?
Are there currently any plans to close Hargett Street?
So it's our understanding, staff's understanding, that with the S line, the intent is to close a at-grade crossing. That's the extent of decisions at this point.
With your understanding of the approved plans for Rusbus, could you imagine anything that any other kind of crossing that could possibly happen?
In theory, yes. I think there would be a desire to create something ultimately, but at this time, we would only be speculating or
Yeah.
or guessing at what we could engineer.
So while you're up there, Bradley, is there another safer scenario that can be considered for this case in terms of driveway spacing?
To elaborate on my comment, what this site plan provides is separation from the intersection, which is also important, and that's a spacing standard as well. The inclusion of service activities such as the loading and unloading and the trash within the building and not in the public space, we felt that added value, that ultimately provided value to the overall public space.
And those would be minimizing operational issues.
Within the public right of way, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you for your patience. Okay, at this time, I will now close this hearing for deliberation within the commission. Anybody want to start things off?
I would just say that I applaud them on the creativity and the design. I think overall, I think the design looks nice and articulate with what's been presented. Definitely like to split these out.
Yeah.
I'm having, I think, with the cross access and driveway spacing, and confirming what my thoughts were, is that those to me are pretty simple requests that I can get behind and approve. I'm still having issues with this step back. And I would love to have some more conversation on it, but I'm still having some, there's been a lot of information brought up about adjacent neighbors and this and that, and to some regards, we do need to look at blocks as a whole, but that has not been approved. There's nothing really going on yet, so we really can't say, hey, this is in line with that, or or vice versa. So I think without that being said, I think some additional research to see if there's something else. I just don't know that those little pocket parks or those little areas really add for the decreased amount of, we're not getting a whole lot for what we're giving up, right? 3 feet. I mean, it's a gesture, but
Yeah, and we talked a lot about Boylan, not so much about Hargett, but
Hargett's got a lot of grade change, and
it does. But I mean, even if you look at the diagrams in the UDO, like they show a massing that has a patio level, and there's still a setback.
Right.
So this just proposes to have the patio without the setback, without a setback,
right,
and without amenity space.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah. It's really relief. It really feels like a relief from all of the requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as percentage of glass and those, I mean, I think with the articulation and stuff, I can get behind that. I think they've articulated it very well. I think it gives a nice base and element, and it's a little different than just seeing all glass like we're seeing in a lot of these kind of current buildings. It gives a little more articulation and interest.
Yeah.
So I can totally personally get behind that as well. So it's really just that one, and it's unfortunately it's a big one.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to best resolve that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, and would probably just add, I think the louver screening is something that I could get behind as well.
Totally.
But I would like to see that. I mean, it would be nice to be able to see what that louver is, if there's a picture, something. What's the spacing? What does it look like? I think a little more information would be helpful.
Yeah.
Because these are important. We hear a lot of this with more and more with parking structures and people living directly across the street, and just.
Yeah, it would be nice to see a section through that to see what that looks like. But I can get the 42-inch barrier wall that is going to block most headlights, and so you're going to get some refracted light that comes off the backside of those louvers.
Yep.
But yes, it would have been nice to see a section.
Yeah, I think what's being described and why I asked the questions, we see those a lot in my line of work. What I hear them describing is similar to a construction specialties or an AWV mechanical vent that you're somewhere around 50% air, and it's a drainable louver.
I'm thinking of a fin or something.
Yeah, it's I understand that it's early in the design phase, and you don't want to get stuck saying we're going to do exactly X, Y, or Z. But if you know what category it's in and you can show precedent, or if you know exactly what you're going to put because you put it on 5 other buildings, I will just say for the record that is going to help us make a clear, quick decision about things like louvers and transparency. I mirror everything that Corey and Marcus said. I think that I think there's a clear argument for the transparency. I think there's a clear argument that was made for driveway spacing as well. Maybe not I don't know if it was not clear or not sufficient argument for the step back, the relief from step back.
I'm pretty happy with the way the storefront ground level, functionally works. I think the split deck actually is pretty operationally helpful. Either of the landscape architects have any thoughts on the green wall?
I was just in Charlotte yesterday and saw a really functional green wall, and that made me excited. So, green walls I think don't work very well when they're on the south side, though, and this one is on the south side, so it certainly is concerning. East-west facing green walls do much better because they don't get full sun or full shade.
I typically see them fail, but
Yep.
that's not to say they can't work.
Given that that's part of the transparency, would you suggest something different, or are you comfortable with that as part of it?
I think I'd be comfortable with it. I think there will be
I would like to see it succeed.
Yeah, I think there will be enough of a push from residents and, to make it not look bad. So I trust that it will succeed one way or another.
I don't agree that the Hargett side is a good facade. I think the Boylan side has actual transparency. There's program that engages the sidewalk. I feel like along the Hargett side, the replacement for transparency is things attached to the building. Public art, a green wall that may or may not live. It's a pretty tough elevation from a pedestrian standpoint. And I do think it's kind of like we're looking through the keyhole with both eyes here lately. We get lost in the language and forget that the whole point of the transparency requirement is to create engagement between the building and the pedestrian environment. And that I don't see that happening at all on that
I think the
Hargett
hard
Street
part is
side.
the grade is so, I mean, you're really just looking at wall no matter what, right?
But I mean, there
what
are
would
a
you
lot
do
of things that
differently?
designers do that are hard. I mean, I just, I feel like we could figure that out. I think it's very unlikely that any number of interest groups in the city in the future will approve closing Hargett Street. It has an important history as a street in the city. So I don't think we can rely on the fact that it's eventually maybe going to be a dead end to just throw away that facade.
And just to be clear, that decision has not been
And it has not been made
yet.
Yeah.
Now, what would you do differently in terms of the transformer room?
Well, I mean, I don't think it doesn't feel like it's the Appearance Commission's job to solve the problem. Right?
Duke
I mean,
transformer.
What's that?
The Duke required transformer.
Yeah.
I think it's required because there's a building.
It's a building.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's things you can do with that.
But it's not transparency. I just mean it's a critical element.
It's never going to be transparency. Right. It's what do you do with that space?
That's right. What do you do with the adjacent spaces to make it a little extra special?
So, Matt, I think we're balking on some of this because we see the complex situation that's there and don't see a clear way to improve it more than what they've shown. But I think, I mean, are you suggesting that they come back and show us something like more above and beyond what they have done to meet the findings that are written?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, that there's just a clear replacement of the requirement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of like we're talking about with whether or not there's enough amenity along Boylan. I mean, I think we're feeling okay about Boylan, but similar to what Catherine said about are we actually getting the things that are required to be provided in lieu of?
Yeah, I'm just looking at them.
So I think those things that are required to be in lieu of, correct me if I'm wrong, that's related to the step back, not the transparency.
No, so street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural, artistic, or landscape treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency.
Okay. Okay.
Might be good for Casey to put the findings up so you have them.
So, I mean, I think they made a case that they included those. I think Matt, where you might be getting at is the approved alternate is consistent with the intent of transparency requirements. I'm not sure, because I think it's pretty clear that they provided evidence for number 2. Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, did they to the level of
To the level of-
transparency that would normally be required is kind of the question, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe it is number 2. I don't know. What do you think?
I think we probably all have different opinions as
Yeah,
to
right.
whether or not they've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other thoughts? I think pretty soon here we should chop up a couple that we can agree on and then focus on the ones that we don't, just in the sake of time. So it sounds like there's general agreement on driveway spacing.
Cross-access.
Would anybody make a motion, be interested in making a motion on those two?
Yeah, a couple of things real quick before you
Yep.
vote.
Sure.
Yeah, you got to identify who's voting.
Yep.
The other thing is, if you want to say that on some of these requests, you want them to come back with more information, it would probably be best to vote all at one time. I don't know if that's what you intend to do or not, but.
Or instead of approving
It can-
two
yeah,
and
2
asking
now,
for
and
more
then come back
information
and
on
we'll
the
do
other
3
two.
next.
Oh, I
yeah.
see. Okay.
I think it'd be a lot cleaner, but I don't know if you want to go that approach or not. I just heard some talk about it, so.
That's good advice. That's good advice.
So we should flip and stick to the hard ones first.
Yeah.
Would it give them a comfort level if we got rid of a couple of these, so it'd be a couple less things to worry about?
I think what Catherine's saying is it's cleaner because if they come back with something different, it might
Gotcha.
affect the 2 things that we approved.
Okay.
Is that what you were kind of implying in terms of the?
Yeah,
it
and
being
I just have
cleaner?
never seen a QJ case be approved in pieces over different hearings.
Okay.
Normally, it's all at one time. It's just because it's all an evidentiary hearing that goes towards the decision for each one of them.
I see. Oh. Haven't we done that before?
I don't think with me, maybe. I don't recall doing that.
Maybe not with a QJ. We did.
Yeah.
Not with QJ.
Before.
You could have done it
we
with
did
him
a
when he was an
lot
admin alternate. Yep.
Okay. With that understanding, I guess we can get clear up who's voting, even though we may not be doing that right now. So who is the most senior
It's a
alternate?
tie between Matt and Catherine. So.
Oh, really?
Flip for it.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I don't mind.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll, if we have this happen again, we can switch with the other
There we
one.
go.
So Catherine is voting member? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Molly, do you have something you want to say?
I do. I have two points. One, the quicker one, being that the intent of the transparency requirement is stated in the UDO, and the intent is to provide visual interest along the street-facing facade. So just to
Thank you
get
for
that out there. The second, with respect to the step back, I have a proposal on that one, which is that third requirement seems to be the sticking point, that third standard. That one is sort of an if-then statement. There's no requirement that the setback be in lieu of the step back. And I think we'd be happy to not propose it as being in lieu, as simply standing on its own, and simply taking that off the table. In which case, I'd be curious if there is any issue with any of the remaining standards for the step back.
Can you show us the standards? Can you pull those up? So you're basically saying there's no in lieu, you just don't want to have the step back. Is that right?
I don't know where the standards are in here. There it is. Right. So, unrelated setback. This is sort of an if it is in lieu, then we have to do these certain things. We made a good faith attempt to show that we were doing them, but we're hearing that it is not necessarily accepted as being in lieu. So happy to simply let it stand on its own.
So they're just saying, yeah.
I don't think it's written that way.
Complete release from the 12-foot
It's just
step
written
back.
for complete relief, not,
Yeah.
not anything in lieu of.
Yeah. Sounds like you never asked for it to be in lieu
It's
of.
already that way. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's already written that way in the request.
We did respond in the responses to the design alternate standards. We're happy to withdraw that and simply focus on the remaining standards.
I think the reason it became an issue is just because they mentioned it in their verbal presentation. But it,
right.
I mean, I'm fine with ignoring number 3. I think there's enough other stuff there that there are questions about.
Yeah. I think it's their call if they withdraw that kind of in the alternative perspective.
I'm curious if there are remaining issues if we do that. This seemed to be the focus of the discussion.
Yeah, I think number 1 is fairly general and leaves it open for a lot of debate.
Mm-hmm.
On a different tact, are there any of the design alternate requests besides passing that anyone has questions about?
Sounds like there's some concern about transparency, but yeah, I would say I'm significantly concerned about the step back. It doesn't change my feelings that they aren't doing a setback in lieu of. Certainly feel like there is, to me, concern about the canyon effects that would be caused if there was a building of similar size on the other side of Boylan, and knowing that the block and the block next to it all are going to have similar form, it certainly feels concerning to me about what that effect may cause for pedestrians.
I would agree with you.
Yeah. To my in my recollection, I don't recall a case similar to this where we've set precedent for complete relief. I think there's been plenty of scenarios where the same argument was presented, that unit layout, you spacing, your structural implications maybe result that my setback can only be 3 feet or 5 feet. I don't recall that we've ever said 0's okay.
I think we did on where Dawson, South Street, Lenore Street. But that tower, you know, on the south end
near
of
the
town.
railroad. Yeah.
But that has no ability to have another big building near it.
I think there's still some step back.
There was some folding step back,
Oh, was there?
and there was a colonnade of
plank.
setback, if you would.
It's also not a pedestrian environment at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really different.
To your point, yes, we
different. No.
most commonly approve these where there is some element of a step back, some other type of
Where
treatment
that
at that
Yeah.
middle section.
Yeah.
Though I will say they have absolutely proposed architectural treatment
down.
to distinguish between the different layers.
Come by the Rust Bus.
I have a concern that if part of the intent is to prevent wind tunnel effect, if we're setting the line at a certain point, and the argument for the future ones is going to be that one is at this line and the other ones have to be 2, then I think we need to be very careful about where that line is. And I know we can't necessarily, make decisions beyond our borders, but it will have impacts on the future placement.
Yeah. So I hear a pretty unanimous concern here, and I just want to open it back up.
Yeah,
Would
thank
you
you.
like to come back to us with
I guess I have a
addressing
question
this
on
concern?
it because I keep hearing canyon effect, which I'm not sure which of the standards that is referring to. We've heard evidence on the standards as they
Canyon
So
effect
it's in the intent of the building massing standards. It says step backs are intended to avoid a canyon effect.
So we have that it's described as providing access to light and air at street level and mitigating wind impacts. So is it
Canyon effect is related to wind and light impacts.
wind and light concerns for both? And you saw the shadow study and feel that it's not sufficient?
I don't have concerns over shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Do other folks have?
You have concern over wind.
No.
Light.
I don't know, those things, while they're opposites, aren't necessarily the same thing.
So if every building in the city was built like that, you'd be all right with it? Without a step back.
She asked about the shadow study. I don't think we're talking about the shadow study with regards to this.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think it relates more to scale. It says visually reduce the perceived scale of a building.
So scale and wind are the concerns?
I also do have concerns that not necessarily the light, but it's light and air at street level, right? We have a desire for pedestrians at street level to not be crowded out by buildings either visually or spatially. And so that's, the shadow study seems like might be alleviating concerns on that, but air at street level I think is a concern, mitigating wind impacts is a concern, and then the need to produce a consistent street wall and visually reduce the scale of a building.
Okay, so what I've heard is that scale is an issue, needing to visually reduce the scale through some other architectural treatment.
Well, the purpose of the point of a step back is that it has an automatic impact on reducing the scale of a building. So to have zero step back, which is the proposal, right, as we have it, and to have, no proposed alternative in lieu of setback, then we don't have any real visual reduction on the perceived scale of a building from street level experience.
So we have presented evidence today on some other factors. We could bring back more, but we have presented evidence today regarding architectural treatments that reduce the visual scale, which is a fairly common way that's achieved in many of our buildings. But we're hearing that scale is our issue here. So maybe bringing back the setback in lieu and providing additional information about the amenities in that area.
I would be
it sounds
curious
like there's
to see that.
concerns about several things that we don't believe have been addressed adequately in this hearing. It sounds like air, light, the pedestrian experience, the building massing because of the step back. So I think it's pretty clear what the concerns are, and so.
Right, I'm just looking for detail because we want to come back with something that satisfies it.
Well,
so just going through them one by
What
one.
we don't want to see is a full request for full relief from step back with no clear explanation of what's been done in lieu for the pedestrian experience.
Right, and the things that need to be done in lieu: air, light, massing. Those are the three things affecting the pedestrian experience. Now I heard air distinguished from wind. I don't follow.
I think just a better explanation of, I think what I heard was the eroding away at the corners was, it may be worth doing a study that shows visually how that actually happens.
Can we study wind?
I guess there's two different ways of looking at it. We're looking at wind at level 1. That's the important part. But the main step back is happening up much higher. So our concern, and mainly on level 1, is the adjacency of any potential proposed buildings, and we're relieving that aspect of it. So you have to look at it from two different ways. One is up high, where the building step back, where we're trying to alleviate that step back from happening, and then the level 1 experience. Those are two different things.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest part of it is reducing the scale.
Yeah,
and obviously the zero step back does nothing towards that, and I know. I mean, I understand the adjacency of residential units to the parking deck, right? But I think along with that comes complexities of a building of this type. And I want to see that. I want to really understand why something can't be achieved there. I'm not saying it has to be 12. There's plenty of scenarios where something less than that have been approved, but something there to reduce that scale.
Just to expand, I recall a particular case where we accepted both some additional pedestrian, in the setback, some additional enhancements, as well as it might even have been of like 2 foot, step back, something.
So I guess we're still talking about two different things. Are you talking about level 1?
No.
You're talking about.
I'm talking about up top.
Yeah. They're related by number 3 if number 3 is triggered, though, as we've seen in a couple places. What, I'm just going to talk out loud. I'm not an architect. Is it conceivable that they would come back with, remove the 3 foot setback and then utilize that partly for step back?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So they get rid of that step back or get rid of the setback and put it in the step back.
And does that result in a design that we like less?
I can't say one way or the other, because then you've only got a 3 foot step back instead of a 12 foot step back. And I get the intent of reducing the scale is not about reducing the scale at the pedestrian level. It's about reducing the scale of a 20-story building on the street.
Right, and I may not be allowed to talk with, I know the session's closed, I guess, for comment, but we achieved that, we believe we achieved that up to our amenity level in terms of how we've broken up the architecture to create that one pedestrian scale. One, we create the scale of the user at level 1 to level 2, and then we broke the scale up again at level 8. So we're creating a large horizontal, instead of this perceived vertical mass, we have a large horizontal break. And not only just, we have multiple horizontal breaks and creating different massing zones. So it's a lot of traditional architecture base, the middle, top. And so what we try to do is create multiple visual cues, especially on Boylan, because that's the area of the most concern, of course, to break that massing up. And I think that we have achieved in terms of creating that break up to where it starts at the primary residential portion of the building up to level 20. It's a completely separate massing. And whether or not that step back occurs, I don't think visually would really impact whether it was at the face or 9 feet back.
So my concern with that massing break at level 7, level 8, wherever it is there, is that it actually forms a soffit that actually extends over the pedestrian space. So to me, it only exacerbates that canyon effect because it protrudes out from the building over the pedestrian right-of-way versus being a break in material that's in line with at the vertical plane of the building. See what I'm saying there? Where it steps out like that. It was at 3, 4, maybe 5 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That to me creates more of that canyon effect by starting to bring the building over the pedestrian space.
But if anything, it would do the opposite. It wouldn't. I mean, that would reduce a canyon effect.
So I'm not. I guess I'm not talking about a canyon effect in terms of any kind of wind or anything like that. It's more. You think a dry, maybe a roadway that has the nice big oak trees, right? That come out and over. And we all love that, right? I don't think we love that in our buildings, and I think that's, to me, that's what your attempt there at the massing at that 7th or 8th floor, that's what that's doing.
But ultimately, that was the goal, was that architectural rhythm and language is there as an intent to really bring the scale of this huge facade down. I mean, that's really what yep. I think we are achieving. Whether or not that facade hangs out 2 feet or 3 feet, we could reduce that, obviously, and to meet your requirements. But that large horizontal break, again, is bringing that architectural scale down.
Yep.
I think we understand that. I think she's right here. She's hiding behind Catherine.
Oh, okay.
Is there a question?
Do you have any way that you would like to proceed? Knowing.
Yeah, so we're happy to come back and to bring additional information and just making sure that we understand what everyone's looking for. So, we heard that there's still a light problem that is still on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just it's not the only one.
I think the shadow exhibit that you're talking about that you used to illustrate the shading is okay. I think it could be more effective, but I don't think necessarily you need to. That's a requirement that any of us are stuck on.
Okay.
I think just to summarize what I think all feel is that the step back, the zero step back, with no real, we basically don't feel the zero step back with what you've provided is sufficient to meet the building massing intent.
And that intent is fairly complicated, so
Yeah.
so it doesn't meet
Yeah.
the intent with respect to the wind effects.
Reducing the scale.
Scale.
Reducing scale.
With
Okay.
reducing the scale.
To simplify this, it's scale, not
It is-
so much light.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it might be a little of all of them, but scale is the biggest one.
Okay. Okay, so seems like scale and wind are the major outstanding issues. More information as to how those are being addressed. Okay, and these all relate to step back.
Yeah, and then I think there was, if you could provide some more information on what exactly the louvers are.
And Matt, do you want to offer any comments about the transparency on Hargett? What you might want to see?
I don't think so. I mean, if no one else is feeling strongly about
No,
that.
I agree with you. I think you just need to activate it. I think they've done a good job on both sides of that stair tower to activate that. Is it enough? I don't know. I think some additional study couldn't hurt in that area.
Yeah, and it's hard to talk about these things without getting subjective, but it would be nice to have some demonstration of how the things you're proposing to attach to the building, which would be the public art and the green wall, actually engage the pedestrians on Hargett Street. I don't know if that's a drawing or a section and I think in general we've made several comments about how many of the drawings could have been much easier to read and more helpful. So it'd be good to have a graphic, demonstration of how you're doing that.
And accurate.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I'll say personally, I'm fairly content with the transparency, just in terms of what we've seen previously and what's been offered and we've approved.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, this case will be continued to the, Molly, do you want us to continue it to the July 6th? Is that, okay. Thank you all. This case will be continued to the July 6th hearing.
On a somewhat related note, I have noticed that some of the approvals we've made with public art are not quite making it through the construction process. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
No.
I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but I will try and make note of it next time I see it.
Pendo
Does it
building.
include the canvas one that's being ripped off the building on between Morgan and?
That might be
That
one
Pendo,
of them,
yeah.
yeah. Just a note.
Yeah, we have to approve minutes. Yeah. It's like, we don't get
So,
to look at it.
I read the minutes and they were very short. I would motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved as written.
Can I get the motion? Who made the motion in the second, please?
I made the motion.
I seconded.
Thank you all for a long evening. Those were two surprisingly difficult cases, but really appreciate everyone's input on it. And yeah, look forward to seeing the next ones. And does anybody else have any other comments or anything they want to talk about?
No proposed text changes
All right, thank you.
that affect us.
It would be good to talk about visual interest at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Just as a
That'd be
group.
great.
Like
Yeah.
maybe on an off Thursday.
Yeah, let's do that.
That sounds fun.
I would really appreciate that conversation.
We're weirdos, that we think it's fun, but yeah.
And I would just like to apologize for the whole commission for not getting our stuff in on time. Sorry, Casey.
Yes, sorry, Casey.
I still haven't given you mine, so I'm apologizing in person. I'm working on it. Thank you. All right, this meeting adjourned.